Right, welcome everyone to Cadsdown Business Support Centre, Bideford, and those joining us on YouTube for the Plans Committee meeting of the 25th of July. There is no planned fire drill this morning, so should the alarm go off, please leave the building the way that you came in and please do not use the lift. Before we start, I'd just like to ask committee members to introduce themselves by stating their name and the ward they represent, and likewise can the officers introduce themselves. So starting on this end.
I'm Doug Smith. I represent Great Torrington.
My name is Kit Heppel and I represent Milton and Tameside ward.
Good morning, I'm Jane Whittaker and I represent Northern and Orchard Hill.
Doug Bushby, Bideford North Ward.
Morning, my name is Peter Haynes, I represent Appledore.
Good morning, Chris Wheatley represents Sheffield Langford ward. Morning, Hugh Thomas, Bideford East.
Good morning, everybody. Chris Leather, and I represent Northern and Orchard Hill.
Morning, I'm Stacey Dory, I'm Head of Legal and Governance.
Good morning, my name is Rosemary Locke and I represent Two Rivers and Three Moors.
Good morning, I'm Helen Smith, Planning Manager.
Good morning, Tom Vanstone, Democratic Services Manager.
Good morning, Sandra, Committee Clerk.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the agenda, item number 1, apologies.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, the minutes of the 11th of July will be presented at the 12th of September meeting. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Members with interest to declare should refer to the agenda item and describe the nature of their interest when the item is being considered. Elected members of DDC in the town and parish councils who have considered the plan and application by virtue of their membership of that council hold a personal interest and are deemed to have considered the application separately, and the expressed views of that council do not bind the members concerned, and they also consider the application afresh, which may include further information. Item number 4, agreements between parts 1 and 2. We have no part 2. Item number 5, urgent matters. As we all know, application C has been withdrawn from this agenda. And for information only, our next Plans Committee meeting will be Thursday, the 12th of September. Thursday, the 12th of September will be our next meeting. Item number 6, public participation. The order of speaking is as follows. A member of the town or parish council, 2 members of the public against, 2 members of the public in support. All of the above have 3 minutes each. And finally, the ward member may speak, and they are not limited to 3 minutes. I will read out the names of those who have registered to speak as and when we come to each application. So item number 7, moving on to the planning applications. Application A, application number 1/0295, land adjacent Brunswick Hall, Bideford, mixed use redevelopment. And it's on pages 2 to 89 of your addendum. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes, hands up.
Chair, I'd like to declare an interest, receive some sponsorship from Brunswick Ward for a charity event on Ward Landing.
Thank you very much. So the officer will now get the presentation. Do you want the microphone then?
Good morning, members. So I will run through the presentation for application 1/0295/2024 FULM, which seeks mixed use redevelopment, providing residential units, commercial units, Class C, with public open space, car parking and associated landscaping, removal of hard standing, ground preparation and infrastructure work at land at and adjacent to Brunswick Wharf, Barnstable Street and Stillwater. This application is before you today due to council-owned land being within the red line of the application boundary. So in line with the Constitution, that has to come before committee. This was subject to a virtual site visit earlier in the week. And just to sort of clarify, there is an implemented consent on this site that Plans Committee considered back in 2021. It's referred to as the extant scheme throughout the report. So if I refer to the extant scheme in my presentation, that's what I'm referring to. Just a couple quick verbal updates. There are some additional plans that have been left off of the plan schedule, which, should members be minded to approve, would need to be included on any decision notice. These are all plans that you were shown in the virtual site visit and are on the portal. They relate to the drawings within the updated flood risk assessment and also access arrangement plans. So if members are minded to approve, the plans on the screen now would need to be included on the plan schedule. And there are a couple, one additional condition, which is on the screen before you now. This is recommended by the Environment Agency. This relates to a detailed scheme for ventilation openings. And then this is a slight amended wording to the current condition 7 on your agenda. Essentially achieves the same thing, but it's just slightly updated wording. And this condition seeks a detailed design of flood resistant and resilient measures to come forward. So I would recommend that these 2 conditions are included should members be minded to approve. The agent and applicant have come back with some what are sort of minor comments on the draft conditions, which relate to things like incorporating the ability to consider the discharge of details on a phased basis, reference to enabling works, including flood defence works, etc., etc. These aren't significant changes to the conditions before you. So I would just ask that should members be minded to approve, that delegated authority is given to officers in consultation with the chair and vice chair to make any subtle amendments to the conditions. Nothing significant that would have a bearing on what you're considering. So moving on to the presentation now. You can see the site on this aerial image outlined in a red circle. The site is a well-known key river frontage site within the built-up area of Bideford. It sits on the east side of the River Torridge. It's within the development boundary. This is the submitted site location plan, which shows the extent of the application before you. It's 0.99 hectares in area. This is a further aerial image that just zooms in slightly and gives an indication of the surrounding context and immediate context of the site. You can see to the north, the site is bound by Wooder Surgery and Ethelwyn Brown. Further beyond to the north, to the east is Barnstable Street. To the south is the highway along the Long Bridge, and to the west is the River Torridge. The immediate sort of environs of the site comprise a mix of uses. There are residential uses, but also the surgery, the Royal Hotel, public houses, takeaways, and various commercial premises. So it is very much a mixed use area as existing. This is an image that is from a slightly different angle and just highlights some of those key features. So number 1 is the Long Bridge. You've got various listed buildings on Barnstable Street, and number 2 is the Royal Hotel. And then you have sort of 3, 4 and 5 are properties on Barnstable Street that are grade 2 listed. Number 6 is the Milestone that's grade 2 listed. Of note, you've got a number 7, the Wooder Surgery. Number 13 is the Tark Trail, just that you can appreciate the proximity to the site. A number of historic photos were shown to you in the virtual site visit. I don't propose to run through those again. This is just one that just sets a bit of a helpful context to how the site was. The history of the site has informed this amended design. So I feel that this just sort of depicts what that wharf type character was historically. There are a significant level of heritage assets in the vicinity of the site, in close relationship to the site, including conservation areas. On here you can see, so in terms of grade 1 listed buildings, you've got the Long Bridge itself and the Royal Hotel. That's the very highest level of listing. We then have the properties along Barnstable Street and the Milestone, which are grade 2 listed. just to confirm the extent of the conservation areas. So on the left is the Bideford Conservation Area, which is on the other side of the river. You can see the site outlined in blue. And then the site, the image on the right is the Bideford East Conservation Area. You can see the site falls completely within that conservation area. The site is also within flood zone 3, as can be seen on this EA flood mapping on the screen now. And just some sort of current views of the site from key viewpoints. So you have from across the river at the top, from the Long Bridge, and also from the roundabout at the end of the Long Bridge looking across Barnstaple Street, and then from the north end of Barnstaple Street looking back towards the site. This is the existing site plan that has been submitted. You can see the car park that exists on the northern part of the site. The southern half of the site is cleared now. Buildings have been removed. It is essentially a clear site surrounded by Harris fencing at the moment. In the existing elevations, given the clear nature of the site, so at the moment there is a sort of clear perspective of the properties on Barnstaple Street. So just running through the plans that are before you for consideration. Here is the bottom plan is what is before you. So that's the proposed block plan. The block plan above is the block plan associated with the extant scheme. With some of the images, as with the site visit, I do provide a comparison with what has got consent, because that is a material consideration. So as you can see, the built form is not significantly different, and the main sort of difference is the removal of the link section between the northern two blocks. So this is the level of accommodation that's proposed as part of this application. So it seeks consent for 101 residential units, 533 square metres of retail commercial space, a public square which extends to 1,080 square metres. There are private communal gardens between the large residential blocks of 603 square metres. There are 103 private car parking spaces proposed, 31 public car parking spaces, which are now in a surface level car park, 145 private cycle parking spaces, and 40 public cycle parking spaces. As a comparison, the extant scheme secured consent for 85 residential units, 1,088 square metres of commercial uses, and 45 public car parking spaces, just as a comparison. So I'll just run through the site plans now. There are individual floor plans for each block. However, I think this adequately shows you what's coming forward. So the 533 square metres of commercial you can see is predominantly along the lower ground level of the site, with active sort of frontages onto Barnstaple Street and also along two sides of the public square. The residential is then comprised across all 5 of the blocks. In terms of housing mix, it is a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bed units. The mix is 13% 1 bed, 39% 2 bed, 38% 3 bed and 10% 4 bed. As set in your report, that is broadly in line with our target housing mix. There are ancillary structures as well right along the northern boundary with the surgery, which is for a sort of sprinkler system and substation. I'll just work through each of these plans. So this is the upper ground site plan, and you'll see the sort of pink colour is the only commercial element that's at first floor, and that sits within the southernmost building. With the remaining floors all proposing residential to varying sizes. So I'll just run through them. That's level 2, level 3, level 4, and that's the roof plan. These are sections across the site showing the blocks of accommodation. The overall height of 4 of the blocks is no greater than the consented scheme. The Brunswick Wharf building, which is the smallest at the southern end, is marginally taller than what is consented. So the three larger blocks are roughly 24.5 metres high. Steamer Wharf, which is then, we're working sort of north to south here, is 19.8 metres tall, and Brunswick 17.35 metres tall. These are the site elevations. So the top, the east is onto Barnstable Street, and then below we have the river frontage elevation. The red sort of marked area denotes where there'll be openings in the wall behind a decorative screen. So the detailing of that would add some interest along that quayside walk. And as explained during the site visits, officers did raise concern over the level and extent of the balconies within, particularly on the river frontage. And this image before you shows a reduced scale of the same number, but they're reduced in width, so that sort of the architecture and the built form can be appreciated. This is the contextual elevation showing the backdrop of the town, certainly in the image below. And I'll just run through each of the blocks. So starting from south, working north, this is the Brunswick Wharf proposed elevations. This is the one building that would incorporate some stonework. Steamer Wharf proposed elevations. Queen's Wharf proposed elevations. Clarence Wharf South. And Clarence Wharf. And these are the sort of ancillary structures which are relatively sort of minor in scale. But you can see these are sited along the northern boundary of the site and are of a similar scale and outline to the consented scheme. The nearest block to the wood estate is actually further away now as well, as can be seen on the screen. So these are just some comparisons to show the extent versus what's proposed. On the left-hand side, you have the elevations as consented compared to what's proposed, and a little bit more detail on the right, the Barnstable Street elevation with the proposed, and again, showing where the previous entrance to undercroft parking was approved. Now the surface parking for that aesthetic looks quite different. Some perspectives showing from the west side of the bridge, so the top is the consented scheme, below is the scheme that's before you today. This is again a comparison of the elevations from the river frontage. The Steamer Wharf building elevations showing how that has changed. And again, a perspective showing how the public space in terms of levels and landscaping has changed. So these are just the LVIA views. So I'll just run through these showing current view, consented view and proposed view. So this is the current view from looking from the north on Barnstable Street. This is the consented, and this is what's proposed. From across the other side of the river, so Woodford Quay looking back across. So as existing, as consented, as proposed. This is from the bottom of the high street, again, consented, proposed. This is from to the south of the bridge, looking back across, you can see the Royal Hotel and the Long Bridge, consented, and this is proposed. And then finally, this is from the north, looking back towards the south, you can see the Royal Hotel and the bridge, the consented and proposed. And then finally, this is sort of looking from the rear, so from the east looking down, so as existing, you can see the visual conservation area on the other side, as consented and as proposed. So hopefully that will help you understand the sort of difference and how the scheme has changed. So just now looking at the landscape and public realm proposals, this is an image from the design and access statement, which clearly shows the mix of those public spaces. So the public car park is now at surface level. The extant scheme proposed and secured public open space across the whole of this area. We're now sort of part of it is lost to surface parking. The public square itself has been better aligned in terms of access and levels, which I'll come on to. The memorial garden will be enhanced and will be accessed through onto a quayside walk. There is also Barnstable Street enhancements with a 3 metre wide cycle footway. And this is the landscape general arrangement plan, which is very detailed. It has a detailed planting scheme, but it just does clearly set out those detailed proposals for each element of the public open space. In terms of levels, there has been a change. The site, you do now access it from Barnstable Street on the same level, so it's around 5.850 AOD. It does then step up as you get closer to the river, so along the western edge of Brunswick Wharf, up to 6.4. There's steps and a ramped area here, and then there's level access though down to the quayside walk, and the car park itself is actually sunken down, so it's not highly visible from views across the river. And this can be seen in these sections. The red line is the previous levels of the public open space. You can see it significantly sort of sunken down now, the public square. And this shows the section through the site, the relationship with the private gardens and the quayside walk. The central sections, which are key in terms of the flood defence works, are at a raised level. Moving on to access, so as explained on the virtual site visit, there are 3 points of vehicular access and various points of pedestrian access as well. The detail of these are shown on these access plans. The Highway Authority has looked at these and are satisfied that there's appropriate visibility. The tidal defence strategy, which is incorporated in the flood risk assessment, has been reviewed and accepted by the Environment Agency. And again, this is the drainage strategy. Devon flood risk were also satisfied, recommending a condition. This is a lighting plan. It shows the different forms of lighting proposed across the site and the areas for it. There is a link between this and the ecology work that's been done, and a condition is recommended to secure this lighting that is considered appropriate. In terms of biodiversity net gain, this is the proposal put forward, and it does achieve, assuming sort of delivery years, 110% net gain, and mainly sort of link through with the proposed landscaping on the site. Refuse and recycling. There were some ongoing discussions involving our waste and recycling team. The initially put forward strategy would raise some objections, concerns around waste vehicles having to stop on Barnstable Street and not being able to access the collection points. So a number of meetings took place, and this is an amended strategy which requires a sort of management programme to be put in place and certain refuse to be carried and delivered to certain points. A condition seeks to make sure that this is secured. So finally, in terms of heads of terms for section 106, the extant scheme has no section 106 attached to it. Your officer's recommendation, should you be minded to approve that there is a need for a section 106. The Environment Agency is seeking a sum, let's be calculated, of 208,370, which would be indexed towards the upgrading of flood defences in the event they improve the surrounding flood defence works to the 2050 standard of 7.6 metres. So that's one element of section 106. The Highway Authority have requested a contribution of £5,000 towards a TRO to relocate the speed limits. It's then also recommended that that section 106 would also secure the public open space scheme and public access rights to the public open space, which can only be done through a legal agreement, and also the car parking. Now, in support of this is a public space plan that the applicant has provided. It's not for approval, but it does help to clarify the respective land ownership within the site. So the memorial garden is within the red line, but not within the ownership of the applicant or the council. The dark blue area is the public square, with the green being the public car park. These would be retained freehold by the applicant. The blue sort of dashed line across the front, that is TDC retained freehold. That would be the quayside walk. And then the lighter, brighter blue at the northern end shows the ability for public access back through to Barnstaple Street. However, there wouldn't be wider vehicular access coming in here. So I just thought that would help to sort of explain the respective ownerships. And this will inform the section 106 discussion. And this is the flood defence scheme that has been costed for the purposes of the bond. So just finishing, all of the material considerations and the planning considerations are set out in your report. I'll just run through them very quickly. So in terms of principle of development, the site is allocated for a mix of uses. It is a key regeneration site within the town. There is also an extant permission on the site for a similar scheme. In terms of layout design, impact on character and landscaping, it's your officer's view that the scheme before you is an improvement in terms of design quality and landscape quality above the extant scheme. The sort of reference to the historic context and the wharf sort of character is welcomed. Number 3, impact on heritage assets. There are a significant number of heritage assets within the site and adjoining the site. Historic England and the Council's conservation officers still raise concern over the proposal, however recognise there is an extant scheme on site. The overall sort of bulk and mass of the development has not significantly changed in terms of impact on heritage assets. So whilst the design is considered to be an improvement, it is considered that that harm still sits at the sort of higher end of less than substantial, meaning that public benefit has to be weighed against that harm. You will see in the report that the officer's view is that the public benefit does outweigh the harm under that NPPF test. Amenity, there are conditions recommended such as construction environment management plan, and also to ensure to protect amenities, particularly the Woodder surgery, in terms of the generator that is located along that boundary. The environmental protection officer, subject to conditions, is raising no objection. In terms of impact on existing solar PV, this was a consideration in the last application. No letters of representation have come in on this point. However, it is still a material consideration. On balance, it was considered an extant scheme that the loss of any energy generation was minimal and factored into the balance. The nearest block to the PV is now further away as well, so it can only be a better situation. Item 6, transport and accessibility. The Highway Authority is satisfied around visibility and highway safety. Car parking, no objections are raised by the Highway Authority in respect of private car parking or public car parking, albeit the Highway Officer does raise some concern around the level of public car parking compared with the existing situation on site. He recognises that there's not a highway safety concern arising out of that. However, there is a wider sort of amenity access to car parking consideration here, and your officer does highlight that as being a negative of the scheme, which must be weighed into the planning balance. Flood risk and drainage, both Devon Flood Risk and the EA are satisfied with the scheme, subject to conditions and the securing of the bond through the section 106. Ecology, there are no objections. Natural England have raised no objection. They have suggested conditions to protect overwintering birds, and information boards, as with the extant scheme, are proposed to be secured via condition. The scheme also secures a significant biodiversity net gain. Contamination, again, no objections. The Environmental Protection Officer is satisfied on that point. Waste, I've already highlighted the amended refuse scheme, and Devon Waste Authority have recommended a condition. Economic regeneration, the economic development team is supportive of the scheme and consider it will bring wider regeneration benefits to the town. There are a series of public benefits set out within your report, and they are weighted according to your officer's views on those. Viability and section 106 obligations. I've run through the section 106 obligations. The development does trigger a need for education, health, and wider public space and built facilities. However, the viability, which had been tested independently, that has been put forward, confirms that the scheme is unviable and can't secure affordable housing or any of the other contributions. So moving finally to the planning balance and conclusion. There is harm identified from this scheme, most notably in terms of impact on heritage assets and the potential for harm to the wider parking provisions of the town. More minor harm is identified in terms of solar PV and amenity. However, your officer's view is that the significant regeneration benefits associated with this scheme do outweigh the harm. Hence, it is a recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Adam, for that very informative and detailed presentation. So I'll now go on to the public speakers list. Our first public speaker is Mr. Phil Jones. If you'd like to come and sit there, we have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Just before we start the clock, just a very minor correction. The extent scheme is for 88 apartments rather than 85. So just thought I'd clarify that. Okay.
Right, you're off.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I will briefly touch on some of the key planning points before handing over to Simon Friend. We previously sat before the Plans Committee in March 2021 with a similar proposal for Brunswick Wharf, which was recommended for approval, and the vote was 8-1 in favour of that application. Since then, the permission has been implemented, and in planning terms, that provides a fallback position and is a material consideration in the assessment of this application, and should be given appropriate weight in your planning assessment and decision-making process. This updated application takes the proposal forwards. It retains the key principles that led to the last application being supported and incorporates many improvements. Your officers have outlined those in their report and presentation, and the briefing note we shared with the committee also summarised those. With very careful and considered design work, the team has successfully removed from construction, principally through making the building more efficient and reducing the amount of steel and concrete, which also results in considerable reductions in indirect carbon.
Could you speak up a bit, deal with the noise? I don't think they can
Banging
hear.
out there. Yeah, I'll carry on, hopefully you hear it. One of the more noticeable changes is to the public car park at the southern end of the site, where previously this was a undercroft space that would have felt like an underground car park. It is now a surface car park. This has necessitated changes to the public square, and the updated design works hard to ensure that that space is successful. It is more accessible with improved levels and landscaping, integrates well with the surrounding commercial spaces, and will provide a wonderful publicly accessible space for Easter Water. Our public consultation also confirmed that people much prefer a surface car park as it feels safer and more familiar. Space for pop-up food and beverage kiosks is allowed for in the design that will add to the vibrancy of the space. The design changes have also required a reduction in the number of public car parking spaces, as discussed, but we believe there will still be sufficient parking available, and the wider review of parking across Bideford can also help to meet public parking demand. We believe that the planning balance is improved with this application. The design has improved, public consultation confirmed that, as have Historic England. On the positive side of the scales, the design improvements, carbon reduction and biodiversity enhancements all add weight. Taken together, in our view, the heritage harm has been reduced and the changes improve the scheme, resulting in the balance being even more favourable for this application than the last scheme. When considered with the fallback position, it is clear that the proposals are in accordance with the aims and objectives of national and local planning.
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Yeah, I am doing. And so we respectfully seek your approval today. We thank officers for working with us and the positive engagement for the community on the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Simon Friend.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors and members of the public. Firstly, I'd like to say how appreciative I am of your officers' willingness to work with Red Earth over the last year to bring about this revised scheme, which, with their input, we all believe is an improvement. Results from our February public consultation confirmed that 79% consider these new proposals to be an improvement on the 2021 scheme, and your officers have received many letters of support. Even Historic England think it's better. I was born in North Devon, went to school locally. My family still farm in the area. I say this because we all know this is not an easy site. It needs someone such as myself who is locally invested and personally committed to deliver this project. Yes, viability is a challenge, but my stance is that I will be retaining a long-term interest in the scheme as landlord of the commercial elements, and so view this with a different investment return profile. That also allows me to maintain the quality and attractiveness of the public realm for the benefit of the local community. The site has been derelict for decades and an eyesore, and yet it looks out onto one of the most beautiful riverside settings in the southwest. Our placemaking objectives will bring a renewed vibrancy to East the Water, open up a new riverside walk, provide links to the Tarka Trail by way of a shared pavement cycle route along Barnstable Street, and respect the history of the site by storytelling throughout the scheme, working with Way of the Wharves, Bideford Bridge Trust, and commissioning local public art through the Burton at Bideford. The vision of the whole team is for this to be an exemplar development. Bideford sits at the heart of the North Devon biosphere. This redesign has enabled us to improve the net to gross efficiency of the massing, cut out much of the previously expensive concrete podium deck, reducing the embodied carbon of the scheme by 33%, whilst at the same time improving the net gain in biodiversity to 110%. We're aiming for the highest EPC energy ratings by using renewable technologies and a fabric-first approach, which will substantially reduce end users' energy bills. Finally, we've carried out what we said we would do, cleared and tidied the site, repaired the quay wall, completed archaeological works and extensive site investigations. Because this is ultimately about local people, we've also sponsored many local community events over the last 3 years. Please support this application so that we can progress to the next stages, which will bring over 30 million of vital investment to the town, real transformation and wider economic benefits for the whole area. Thank you.
Dead on 3 minutes. And our final speaker is the adjacent ward member, councillor Tinsley, please. Hello.
Yeah, I'm speaking as an adjacent ward member for Bideford North and also a long-term member of Torridge Active Travel and a trustee of Way of the Wharves. It's a key strategic site economically, and I've expressed my support to see the site developed in the past. It's a very difficult site, and as you've seen from the huge number of conditions that are being proposed, they're enough to test the patience of any developer, and we're lucky to have somebody so committed. But we always want more. It's a key site not only economically, but historically, and for transport, for communications between the two sides of the town. So I'll comment first on the historical side. The comments of Historic England and the Conservation Officer are about the context with other buildings. My angle is the preservation of the memory of what was there before, in the context of Bideford now becoming having become a heritage harbour. The position of the previous sea walls, the weighbridge, and giving a sense of the history of the site through the signage, which Mr. Friends already mentioned. We've got the interpretation boards. I'm glad to see that the plaque, the Brunswick Wharf plaque, will be retained. But I think more could be done to show physically what was there before. For example, pavement plaques such as exist on the other side of the river on the quay there. And Way of the Wharves would are very willing already to help with that, with the content of that. Moving on to the travel, and Active Travel. Torridge Active Travel's been working with Devon County Council and Torridge District Council to produce a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. And two of the things that are really relevant to this this development are access to the Tarka Trail. The two access points to the Tarka Trail on the eastern water side of the river are very, very poor currently. And the pedestrian experience on both sides of the bridge, at both ends of the bridge actually, which really needs improving. I know because I live in Eastern Water and I walk across there every day is very dangerous. So we're disappointed not to see some of these proposals which are in the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan appear in the transport statement and consultation. And the parking losses which the development envisages make it even more important to focus on making cycling and walking more attractive and safer. So I don't know if members would want to put another condition in there, that's up to you, but I would ask Torridge District Council and Devon County Council to use this opportunity to prioritise the implementation of these two items, the access to the Tarka Trail, and at the moment you've got the cycle and walking shared pavement alongside of the development, but it doesn't actually link to the Tarka Trail. And the pedestrian experience crossing the bridge as well. It's an opportunity to make both of those things more attractive to visitors and residents and safer for everyone. Thank you.
Right, that's the last of public speakers, so I'll now throw open the matter for discussion. Who would like to kick off, please? Yes, Councillor James.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to say I appreciate greatly the efforts of Red Earth to make this development acceptable. I agree that it is a slight improvement on the extant development, but nevertheless, we're being required to assess the balance between heritage and public benefit. But I should like to draw everyone's attention to the devastating comments really by Heritage England and also our conservation officer about the impact of this development on the listed buildings in Barnstable Street. It clearly breaks the policies on setting of listed buildings, and it clearly breaks the design policies in the local plan where development is supposed to fit in with the surroundings. I'd like to say that it's a great development, but the more I look at it, I just think it's just a massive imposition on Binford, and monolithic buildings of brick of considerable stories high, particularly the two buildings on the left as you look across the river. They just dominate the whole of that riverside and the buildings behind it. Obviously, one has to look at, you could argue that there were warehouses there before historically, and they had a visual impact, but at least they were, supplying employment for people in the area. I do query, in terms of the public benefits, the claimed regeneration of the area. I suspect that the flats, or a large number of the flats, would be purchased as second properties by people from away. Will they actually contribute greatly to the area? I mean, I may be wrong, but I do have my concerns about that. There's also, it's been mentioned, the reduction of public parking space. Well, that's obviously a reduction of benefit. I think that the public space has been reduced, maybe corrected on that. Traffic impact, the highways have said it's fine, but I mean, you're gonna get over 100 vehicles going into Barnstable Street. Everybody who knows who goes along Barnstable Street knows how congested it gets and the long trail of traffic, particularly in the summer. In the previous development, I suspect would have caused what environmental officers call the street canyon effect, whereby you would have trapped pollution. Though I accept now that you've got spaces between the buildings, but nevertheless, I think there will be quite an increase in pollution from this development. Bearing in mind that our pollution levels in this country are about 3 times above UN recommended limits. So, yeah, I mean, in turn, Councillor Tinsley has referred to the cycle provision. It's great that the developer has put that in, but it's so frustrating that the cycle track ends with the development and doesn't go along and join the Tarka Trail, thereby giving much greater safety to cyclists and pedestrians. If councillors members are minded to approve this development, then I agree. I think I should insist that we have a condition that cycle provision is extended to properly link up with the Tarka Trail. Yeah, that's my comments. I'm sorry to say all this, but the more I look at it, I'm just
Right, Councillor Thomas, you were there.
Thank you. I'm ward member and I'm more generally supportive of the scheme. I do think that it needs something, and I think there's a lot of positives here. I do note the comments from Historic England and our own conservation officer about the size, the mass and the scale of the buildings. And I wonder if there was reference to the blocks being 24.5 metres high. Do we have any figure for the height of the historic buildings? Because we're saying that, you know, they reflect what was there previously. I know we can't go around with a tape measure what was measure what was there 100 years ago, but do we have any indication of how high they might have been?
Similar. Very similar.
Yeah, I can't give you an accurate answer to that. I think that historic image showed definitely the northern building was of a fairly significant bulk of mass, but I wouldn't have thought they were as high as what.
I mean, on a positive side, I mean, yesterday I cycled along the Tarka Trail into Barnstable and I looked at all the new flat developments around the edge of the quay of Barnstable, which are mostly 4 and 5 floors high. There was one that's 6, and although they're not beautiful, they do look appropriate for the setting. And I think, generally speaking, I think these will as well. Regarding the car parking, although we will lose spaces, we'll also lose all spaces for a period of time. Do we have any idea how long the development work will take place? How long there'll be 0 car parking? Because that's also going to impact on the town and on local residents. There are a number of local residents who use those spaces overnight, including the accessible spaces. And I noticed that there'll be a reduction from 5 to 2 accessible spaces. And I just wonder whether any provision can be made for whatever length of time the development takes place for people in the area. There's no reference to EV charging in the car park. And I wonder, particularly with the way things are going, whether that should be included, whether we should be providing some EV charge points within the public car park. I agree with what Councillor Tinsley and Councillor Haynes have said about the link to the Tarka Trail. Mr. Friend referred to it as, you know, linking the development with the Tarka Trail. It doesn't. There's a big gap. Within the active travel group, we've talked about the possibility of realigning a stretch of Barnstable Street, providing some more on-street parking and having a safe cycle route that connects to that frontage. Because I'm not a highways expert, I'm very happy to take advice, but the section between I think Ethelwyn Brown Junction and where the road goes over the bridge, the carriageway is actually a lot wider than it is immediately in front of the development. And I think there would be considerable space for realignment. And if that could be done that would really make a difference, both to development and to access to Bideford as a whole. And I would have thought it would be a selling point for the development if there's a safe link literally from their door onto the Tarka Trail. On a minor matter, I'm a little bit concerned about tree pits. The design shows a 3 metre wide shared path along the frontage with tree pits in it. Now, I know we have some tree pits on the cycle path on the other side of the river, but we also have the Quay car park. And I think most cyclists actually use the Quay car park rather than what is the designated cycle path. And I'm a little bit concerned. I like the idea of having some trees along there, but having tree pits in the middle of a cycle path just seems a little bit illogical to me. I'm also a little bit concerned about the viability issue and the fact that we have essentially a commercial development that can't actually make any contribution to the infrastructure of the area. And I don't know what precedent we have both within Torridge or nationally for that, but it seems a shame, put it very mildly, that we can't get any Section 106 funding as a result of this.
Right, thank you for those comments. Do you wish to come back on?
Sure, I can come
Yeah.
back on a couple of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
I think a number of councillor Thomas's points relate to highways, so just to highlight, we've got Mike Newcomb here, so he might be able to pick up on some of those. Just, I guess, starting with your last point around viability, councillor Thomas, and as members of the committee and certainly members who served on the committee in the last council, that viability, we increasingly see viability on applications, particularly on brownfield developments where there are significant abnormal costs. So councillors Leather and Locke would have been on the committee that considered the creamery site in Great Torrington. I think that's a good example. So that's a consent that couldn't provide for any Section 106, so affordable housing, education, health, public open space, or off-site public open space. The meat factory in Torrington as well. The target in the plan is 30%, and we have developments seem to be performing better, and certainly in greenfield sites. Some work was done looking at how successfully that target has been met, and I think it sort of averages across a period of time across major residential applications, looking at sort of 20–21% affordable. Now, the intent of the policy is not to necessarily achieve 30% on everything. It recognises there will be cases where that can't be achieved. And I think a site like this, where there are significant abnormal costs, most notably around the flood defence works, it doesn't come as a surprise to officers that there are viability concerns. But of course, that is a harm in that there will be a resident population that the scheme can't meet the needs for, and that's factored into your planning balance.
It's not just affordable housing, it's also the contribution to NHS costs.
Yes, health, education, built facilities, all of those. You're right, Councillor Thomas. And just, I mean, but it's probably more appropriate for Mike Newcomb to pick up on some of these points, but the reference to sort of temporary provision of parking during construction, there is a requirement for a phasing plan to confirm how the site will be developed. As things stand at the moment, I can't give an answer on that. It will depend on what point parts of the site are developed, at what point the public car park comes forward. But it's my understanding there isn't a guaranteed ongoing provision of car parking throughout the construction period. If you want Mike Newcomb to pick up.
Yeah, at this stage, then if we ask Mike Newcomb to come forward, and you can put any highway questions to him.
Sorry, just a quick question. Did you see there was 85 dwellings?
88, I've been.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mike, then who'd like to ask them questions?
Could I just jump in and answer a few
Yeah,
questions that
certainly.
were put forward? And sorry, my memory's not so good, so you may have to remind me of some of them in a moment. With regards to the trees in the footway, yeah, the applicant was keen to have that done because of aesthetics, which I understand. Sorry, bear with me. So 3 points really. Number one, and be kind and don't laugh until I finish point two, please. But we're talking about stationary objects, and trees don't jump out on people unless we're planting triffids. But point two is that you're right, there is a precedent already for this on Billyford Quay between Victoria Square and the car park exit, kind of opposite the King's Arms, between the carriageway and the car park. That is already a shared cycleway footway. It's full of all kinds of carbuncle, not just tree pits, but benches and bollards and light columns and goodness knows what else. I have checked the crash figures for the last 5 years, and there is no crash record involving pedestrians or cyclists. You're right, a lot of people may well use the car park, some of them necessarily won't, so there is a precedent there. If you're looking, point three is if you're looking for an ex machina, from a highway authority point of view, you know, we're not big fans of tree pits anyway. It's certainly not a hill we're going to die on with regards to keeping them. So it's really a planning consideration from there onwards, really. Does that answer that question?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, go on.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
With regards to the link from, so we've asked for, and it's been conditioned, we've got, and this was also part of the extant commission, that we've asked for a 3 metre cycleway footway along the frontage. I completely appreciate what you're saying with regards to the link from the end of that point to the north of the site to where the target trail picks up opposite Ethel Wynne Brown Close. Couple of issues there. I mean, we're more than happy to take 106 money to look at that and you know, to try and look at implementing a scheme. I understand the viability is razor thin. And in fact, I believe I'm right in saying that, in fact, this was looked at last time, back in 2020, whenever it was, before. The bigger problem is the fact that it would have required using car parking spaces. And I have been involved in the past with schemes, some occasions where we're talking about putting footways in for child safety so they can get to school safer. And I won't bore you with the exact details of the kind of responses we've got. Suffice to say, if you want to become really unpopular really quickly, try and get rid of local car parking spaces. You know, it's probably fair to say there is no local will or political will to do that at the moment. But like I said,
when you looked at that, did you actually look at reducing the overall width of the carriageway? Because it's very wide at that point. It's almost 3 lanes wide for a section.
It is a B-class road. It is a regular bus route every 15 minutes. I think they run from Monday to Saturday. I'm not sure there's any will. So really what we're talking about is not just the link, it's additional car parking we're talking about. Well, on street car parking?
I think there is space within the highway to move the existing spaces further into the highway if you realign it and have a safe cycle shared path.
Again, an example of a scheme that's been done before I joined Development Management, by the way, was Clovelly Road. And again, I won't bore you with the details of the kind of comments we had back about that scheme. Suffice to say, it's not massively popular. I think that's fair to say. Again, we'll take 106 money to look at it. But like I said, my understanding is that, like I said, we're talking about margins that are razor thin at the moment.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Bushby.
Following on the theme then of the car parking, I've got a couple of other things I'd like to talk about as well, but the car parking. The 31 available spaces is obviously 14 less than the previous consented scheme, but we've got no guarantee that those 31 are going to be public spaces in any case, because public space means they're available to anyone, including the occupiers of these 88 apartments. Because if they've got visitors down or family and friends, they again would be perfectly entitled to park in those because they're public spaces. That's the first thing. So I think to say that we've got 31 public spaces is, a little bit disingenuous in some ways, compared with the existing car park, which is a public space car park, which is open to any members of the public. But one of the main concerns that I've got, if you look in the centre of Westwood Ho, we've got a partly completed block of flats there. So you've got a skeletal form of a building surrounded by some partially completed ones and some fully completed ones. I'm sure everyone that's seen them, all the local councillors, I'm sure, would agree that they, you know, it looks an absolute eyesore there. And I don't see any end in when that is going to be addressed. If you also look at a development down in Hale Harbour, which was on the news not so very long ago, which was a scheme not too dissimilar to this, right on the old Fisherman's Wharf down in Hale Harbour, which was a large development of residential apartments. And all 4 or possibly 5 of the developers that were developing that site have now gone into liquidation. So that's a site, a very prominent site, which is partially completed and now abandoned. And I'm not suggesting for one moment that that's going to happen with this scheme, but it could. We live in very challenging times. You know, we've seen what's happened with, you know, recent developments with, you know, Brexit, the war in Ukraine, etc. You know, it's a volatile situation around the world. This is a multi-million pound development. Anything could happen with it. And I just draw your attention to the Environment Agency's first and second responses where they were objecting to the development. The third response, there's no flood objections to the proposal subject to agree on Section 106 agreement. So by putting £208,000 into the pot, they've bought themselves out of that initial problem there. So they've overcome that with some cash. Is there any way that a similar scheme could be implemented whereby if the development failed for any reason, there was a type of bond, obviously it would need to be a hell of a lot bigger than 208,000 in order to make sure that that development was finished. And that is a real concern that I have. It is such a prominent site and it is going to define the view from west to east forevermore. And it, you know, when it started, it needs to be taken right through to completion and finished. Even though I think, I tend to agree with Councillor Hames, I think the actual end result is going to be a bit overbearing. You know, we have to put up with that because it's already got, as you say, a consent to develop anyway. But I think the present scheme does give me some concerns.
Do I, the solicitor or head want to come back on the bond condition, or is that possible?
I understand your concerns, Councillor Bushby, around sort of delivering completion, noting that the site in Westwood Ho. I think firstly, as it says in the report, yes, you know, the viability it performs very poorly in terms of viability. But that in itself is not a reason to refuse. I think requiring such a bond would only make that viability position even worse than the current situation, and would certainly deter funders and probably mean it would never get off the ground, so to speak. We have a condition requiring phasing. I think with such a poor viability position, it is key that we ensure that the development is phased in a sensible manner with regard to the development economics of it, but also ensuring that we don't just end up with the 3 residential blocks and not the public benefit, hence the need to phase it sensibly. But the viability in itself is not a reason for refusal, and I certainly wouldn't want to encourage such a bond mechanism in planning terms. I don't think it'd be reasonable for us to do that.
Okay. Councillor Leather, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yeah, interesting to hear all the comments about parking, about access to the Tarka Trail. Of course, you can cross the road there. There's more than one access there, rather than just at the end of Ethelwyn Brown. But from this one, it's only a short distance where Woodhurst Surgery is to get into Ethelwyn Brown, and you can get down there. But you can cross the road as well and contact the Targa Trail that way. Parking, and I remember, and I think perhaps some of the other councillors who've been out a long time will remember that the parking there, current car park, was only ever envisaged to be short term. It's a temporary car park, and it was just a stone surface that was temporary until something was done to develop the site. It was always the intention that all that site would be redeveloped. And here we are, years and years have gone by. Tories then surfaced it, tarmacked it, but it was a temporary car park, and I know people have got used to using it. So there will be a reduction in public spaces, but I envisage a lot of people will park over the other side of the river, walk over the old bridge. Certainly visitors, I'm sure would, because they like to walk on that old bridge, as I do, and view the river and view everything. So I don't think parking on the actual site itself for the public is that big an issue. And I attended earlier in the year, the presentation of this new scheme over at the Royal Hotel, and it was very well received by the public. I think it is a big improvement on the extant scheme. I think the finish is far nicer. I do like the brick facing, better than the white render, which would have glared really. So I think the finish is better. I like the fact that that bridging unit has been taken out between the two Clarence Wharf, north and south. So it is an improvement all round. The car parking for the public now is above ground. It was going to be underground. But I mean, members should realise this site is a restricted size with an awful lot of problems in developing it in the first instance. Look at the cost that's already been incurred in demolishing all the rubbish that was left on all the old buildings. And when you talk about the heritage, the listed buildings in Barnstable Street, they were looking at a great black wall facing them for years and years. All right, they've got used to it being cleared now, but they knew surely it was only temporary until something was developed. There will be further setback than that wall that was demolished was, so it will still be further. I know they're high, but I think the whole scheme, we ought to really get behind it, and I'm going to move that we do approve it, Chair. Overbearing, I don't think they'll be overbearing. I think once they're there, and you look from Chudley Fort, it's not going to impinge the view of the river and across to Bideford from Chudley Fort. When you look from the town side then, in Bideford, you'll still see Chudley Fort. What hides Chudley Fort are all the trees up there. But you try taking those down, you'll have Mariah's on the hands. So I think the scheme is an improvement on the extant one. And it's a very, very difficult site to develop by anybody. And I think full mark school really commend for what they've done with it. So I'm going to move approval, Chair.
Right, I've got that. Councillor Apple.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to endorse exactly what Councillor Leather says, and I'm happy to second his recommendation. I personally am pleased at the way the officers have worked with the developers, and I know I represent a very rural ward, which is about as far away from Bideford as you can imagine, but it's obviously you can't help knowing that it is a key regeneration site, and it needs something doing to it, and quickly. And I don't see how any viable scheme can not cause what I consider to be subjective harm to local nearby listed buildings. I mean, it is just impossible. I understand Councillor Thomas's and Councillor Hames' concerns, but I think on balance, it is there for approval, and I'm happy to second Councillor Leather's recommendation.
Councillor Whitaker, you were next.
Yes, I will, and I was going to do exactly what my colleague on my right was going to do. I mean, it's a very difficult site to develop. And I think back over the many years that I've been a councillor, and all sorts of things have come and gone. And sometimes I've sat there and wished with all my heart that we could have something that really reflects the heritage of our town. I really do. I mean, a heritage centre would be absolutely wonderful, but it has to be cost effective at the end of the day. And nothing that ever that we seem to want in that sort of scenario ever came to the fore and was cost effective. I actually think this scheme is a lot better than the one before. I do think it does reflect some of the heritage elements in its own way. It certainly looks a lot better, I have to say, than the white buildings or the light buildings. I can understand some of the concerns about, you know, especially the one about West of Home, because boy, is that an eyesight down there. But you know, Mr. Brand and his business have hung in there. And it must have cost an enormous amount of money to get as far as he has. So I've got some faith in him actually getting to the end of it. I hope he's listening to me, because I really do have some faith that he will actually get to the end of it. And I can't wait to see it finished. I think East the Water has waited a long time to have that site developed. Yeah, there's likely, it's quite likely that lots of people would have wanted different things there. And I would probably join that queue in some senses. But it is what it is. It's a tricky site. It's an expensive site to develop. And if Councillor Heppel hadn't seconded the proposal to grant, I would have done so. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Haines.
Sorry, if we're going to a vote to approve, what's the situation about the proposal or suggestion that we have a 106 condition on the cycle track? Does that come after the vote or?
Well, I just think our planning manager said that he would not recommend that as a planning officer.
Yeah, I was referring to the bond
Yeah.
suggestion. I think members have to consider what's before you. So in terms of, are you suggesting?
Talking about bond.
No, sorry, I would say my response was in respect of that, councillor Holmes. So are you suggesting some sort of mechanism in the section 106 to require a link to the target trail?
Extension of the proposed
So
link.
I think, yeah, I'll let the highway officer come in.
The only thing I would add to that is we're potentially taking a lot of money for a scheme that may not be able to happen feasibly. You know, we can't deliver something. That's the only thing I would say. You can smirk, but I look like you were. Like I said, it's narrowing carriageways isn't quite as easy as it always sounds. And we've got a B road, like I said, which is a regular bus route. I couldn't, and which has been looked at before, and like I said, it just is probably going to be more difficult.
Prioritise cycling rather than cars.
I agree with you. Like I said, I'm 100% behind you on that, and hence the reason we've asked for everything we can. Just to add, I mean, sorry, to harp on that. My bigger concern before was actually getting cyclists over the Long Bridge, and again, that was looked at and last time, and. You know, I was told by the planning officers who were with the authority that wasn't going to happen. You know, there wasn't the kind of money available that we would need. So like I said, that's the only word of caution I would give. We will happily take money to look at it, but like, I can give no guarantee that that's actually achievable or feasible.
Thank you. So what's the mechanism whereby one could push that forward then?
So I think what I would say is that the scheme before you is supported by the highway officer. It does provide for cycling and walking, pedestrian access, yes, within the frontage of the red line, and significant sort of enhancements in terms of pedestrian access. The viability position is very clear, and before you, the scheme can't afford to provide any off-site contributions. It's not deemed as necessary. I would say from the highway officer, there's not an objection on the grounds that there isn't a direct link to the Tarka Trail. So I think all of those things consider, I wouldn't be recommending that such a clause was included, albeit it can be, you know, Councillor Hames is suggesting it, but it hasn't been factored into this scheme or the viability.
I'd like to propose an amendment though, could I?
Yes, Councillor Leather.
Sorry, I could propose an amendment then, could I? To Councillor Leather's proposals. But that we approve the scheme subject to a condition to extend the cycle link or something like that.
So at the moment, yeah, it has been proposed by Councillor Lever and seconded by Councillor Heppel. They haven't proposed that condition, and I think you've just heard you're proposing a condition that they have no idea whether it's viable. So I don't think you can do that today, put that condition on when your officer's advice is it may not be able to be done. And then where does that leave the scheme? In addition, it's not part of the application today. So no, my opinion is you can't.
Thank you very much. Well, from my point of view, I also agree that this scheme is much better than the previous one, especially that it has been moved further away from the medical centre. And I absolutely agree with the Economic Regeneration Officer's comments on page 18. And also the Conservation Officers, she comes back with the comment, there are some positives and some negatives. Well, in life, you never get the perfect scheme. So I will also be supporting the recommendation for approval. Have you ever got any further comments?
Chair.
Yes, councillor.
Yeah, I think an important issue too with this scheme that I meant to mention, and nobody else has, is this scheme enhances the flood protection of a large area of Easter Water. And that's clear from the scheme as it is. So, and the Environment Agency are taking a chunk of money from it towards that. So that's something that we ought to consider as well, that this is enhancing the flood protection of a large area over Easter Water.
Chair, I think the
So
flood-
it has been proposed by council, yes, councillor James.
point of it, surely the flood scheme would have, based on that's applicable to whatever development is there, not just one specific development. So it could be another development on that site and that money would still be valuable. Just a comment, that's all.
Yes, councillor Whitaker.
I really think we should remember how long we've been waiting for something to actually happen on these schemes. You know, there's a real history there of attempts made to do something decent for Easter Water. Not everybody in Easter Water might think it's something decent, but something's going to evolve from this that is going to be far, far better than it's been in the past.
Right, so it has been proposed by councillor Leather, seconded by councillor Heppel, that the application is approved. And going back to the original comments by the planning officer about the additional plans, is that part of your recommendation? And also the slight change in word condition 7
And the additional EA condition.
and the additional EA conditions. Are you happy for those being included in your proposal?
And I think just to confirm that members would be happy for very minor subtle wording to be amended in consultation with chair and vice chair, that's incorporated.
Are you quite happy, proposer and seconder?
Absolutely happy.
Yeah, so we now go to the vote then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Haynes,
Against.
Councillor Heppel,
Or
Councillor Leather,
Or
Councillor Locke,
For,
Councillor Bushby,
Against.
Councillor Smith,
Or
Councillor Thomas,
For.
Councillor Wheatley,
For.
Councillor Whitaker.
For
That's 7 for and 2 against, Chair.
thank you very much indeed. So going on to application B, application 1/0374, 5 Dane Court Northern, a 2-storey rear extension. And it's on pages 5 to 12 of your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Hands up. Yeah.
Dual hatted.
Chair, dual hatted, I come with an open mind.
Right, the officer will now give the presentation, please.
Okay, this is application 1/0374/2024/FUL. The erection of a 2-storey rear extension with an additional first floor window at 5 Dane Court Northern. So the site is near to the swimming pool in Northern, and near to the kind of open space to the north. This is showing, moving on the location. This is showing how it relates to Benson Drive, which is the main kind of entrance. And then you go round into Dane Court. The area to the south is kind of mainly garaging, really kind of car parks of properties. It's a terrace property with 2 other terraces to the north. It's an end terrace property. That's showing the rear extension is proposed going across the whole width of the rear of the property, and it's approximately 3 meters extending in length. You can see there they've incorporated water butts to soak away to deal with the additional surface water from the extension. This is a couple of photos showing the eastern elevation is kind of the main one of concern. That's where the extension is going to come out from. The property is the one on the left, showing how it's attached to the neighbouring property on the right-hand side of that photo. And that's showing the kind of rear of the properties. So the one on the left is taken from the garden of 5 Dane Court looking north, and the one on the right-hand side is taken from the kind of east, looking into the gardens of those 3 terrace properties. 5 Dane Court is the one on the left. This shows the existing elevations of the property. And this shows the proposal. So the original proposal was for a symmetrically pitched extension. We had concerns that this would impact the light on the windows of the property to the north at 4 Dane Court. Following consultation with the agent, this was changed and it's now an asymmetrical pitch to the roof so that it meets with our kind of standards of the 45-degree rule, so that the impact on light is not significant. And also there was an objection that the window to the southern elevation was going to be larger and that it would overlook a property to the south. It was subsequently reduced, and due to the other existing windows on this elevation, it wasn't again considered to be significant overlooking. Also because the distance, the nearest property was about 16 metres, and that's for the bedroom on the first floor. This shows the floor plans. So the one on the right hand one. So that's showing the first floor is a bedroom. Because of the change to the pitch of the roof, there is slightly reduced headroom for part of the bedroom, but because it is bedroom and because the additional space available, it was considered acceptable in terms of space for that bedroom. And the ground floor is to be a family room with 5-fold doors into the garden. In terms of the asymmetrical roof design, there are other properties that have this kind of asymmetrical pitch roof to the front. This one is obviously on the rear and is surrounded by kind of garages and other rear of properties, so it's not as visible as some of these front pitch gables. In terms of material planning considerations, the principle of development for extension under DM25 is acceptable. As mentioned, the character and appearance of this kind of asymmetrical pitch roof is seen in neighbouring properties, so was considered acceptable. The impact on neighbouring amenity by assessing using the 45-degree rule, the impact on light was not considered significant enough to warrant refusal. It's accepted that the gardens are fairly narrow, but there is still garden space available further down the garden compared to the 3-metre extension. The drainage was dealt with by the water butts and soakaway, which was acceptable to South West Water. Due to the minor scale of the scheme, there wasn't any kind of ecological enhancement required. As the scheme is to the rear of the property, there was no impact on parking or highways. And therefore the recommendation was to grant.
Thank you very much. I've got no registered public speakers, so we go straight to discussion. Who'd like to kick off? Yes, Councillor Haynes.
Yeah, I've called this into the committee so that councillors can consider possible effect on particularly the neighbouring property. There was considerable concern at Northern Town Council about the possible impact. I visited the site to see to have a look and see what the development could possibly do. I have every sympathy with the applicant for what they want to extend the house to give greater provision for their children, I think. But weighing against that, I asked councillors to consider the impact on the neighbouring property. The gardens or the yards, I would say, at the back are very small, and this extension will take up quite a space in the backyard. which could possibly have an impact on the amenity of the neighbour. So I invite members to consider this with various arguments. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Yes, Councillor Leather.
Yeah, I know Jane Cornwell. I think they're very modest dwelling, 2-bed dwellings these are. And the accommodation downstairs, very modest. And people are being encouraged now with extending families growing up, needing more room. This is for a family room and a bedroom over the top. And it only goes out 3 meters. That's the exterior measurements, not exterior, which in all money is about 10 feet. So, and there's still plenty of garden there. The asymmetrical roof, I think, does address any concern of loss of light in the next door garden. There's a slight effect, obviously, on the next door garden, because that's the north aspect. But as for overlooking, there's no overlooking issue in my view, because in the roof is a Velux, which is too high up to look out of. In any event, currently on the back of the dwelling is a large double window now that it looks out into all the back garden. So there's no privacy issue as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's, you know, I can fully understand them wanting to put this small extension on the back. I'm going to move that we do grant this, Chair. And I don't see that there is a loss of immunity, a substantial loss, a slight loss possibly for the next door neighbour. But you know,
Councillor Heppel.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Leather. I think the asymmetrical roof redesign addresses the problem of the loss of light, and the officers have considered that there is no significant harm to the next door property. And on balance, whilst I understand Councillor Hames' concerns again, I would recommend, well, I'm happy to second the
Councillor
recommendation.
Whitaker.
Yeah, thank you very much. I actually walked down there and had a look the other evening for myself, although I do know the area quite well. And yeah, they are quite small properties, and I think the trend these days, if you can possibly develop your house and increase the size of your house to meet the needs of your family, is something that people are doing, and it's quite understandable in the current economic climate. I don't really think, especially with the changes to the roof, there's really going to be any significant harm. So although I've got sympathy with Councillor Hames, I think I would agree to grant as well.
All right, any further comments before we go to the vote then? No, so it has been proposed by Councillor Leather, seconded by Councillor Heppel, that the application is approved. So we now go to the vote, please, Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hames.
Abstain.
Councillor Heppel.
For.
Councillor Leather.
or
Councillor Locke.
4.
Councillor Bushby.
4.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Or.
Councillor Wheatley.
Or.
And Councillor Whitaker.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's 8 for and 1
Thank
abstention.
you very much. Right, application C was withdrawn. So we're moving on to application D, application 1/0411, Pontyfoot Equestrian Centre, demolition of existing office building, erection of replacement building, and it's on pages 33 to 42 of your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No? So I'll ask the officer to give the report.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you want the microphone at all?
Application 1/04/0411/2024/FUL. Demolition of existing office building and erection of replacement office building. Thanks. So, it's on the edge of Northern Boroughs, just outside Northern, settlement boundary. the arrow is pointing at the proposed ancillary building. So it's an existing structure on the site. Existing structure is currently used as an office, reception, general storage for the Ride-In Centre, which is very popular and becoming ever more popular. As I say, it's on the outside of settlement boundaries, so it's classified as countryside in the local plan. It's also within the coast and estuarine zone. It's on about 200 metres from the North Devon Coast National Landscape, which formerly was the AONB, and Northern Barrows is the SSSI. So the proposed building is 12 metres by 3.2 and 2.5 in height. Similar to the footprint of the existing structure, although half of it has fallen down. So this shows the uses of the building. They're hoping to have an area for teaching. They encourage people with learning disabilities, and yeah, they need obviously an area for first aid and things like that. So next slide, please. So this is the existing building in a bit of disrepair. Next slide, please. The entrance to the Equine Centre, side view on the boundary of the site. There's some vegetation there to screen it, but I think it would need more landscaping on that side just to screen it from the Northern Barrows. So most of it is in my report, but the landscape character, so I've talked about the principle, impact on character, heritage and landscape. The landscape quality is tranquility and openness. However, there's been a building here for a while, and it is a pretty much direct replacement. So the applicant has also agreed a landscaping scheme, which she has submitted to me, but there's not enough details, so I need to recommend a condition that she submits landscaping details. There's also heritage, so the site has heritage assets which comprise the remnants of the RAF Northern Chain Home Station, and surrounding heritage assets form part of the group listing grade 2. Archaeology at Devon County Council have been consulted, and the Conservation Officer, and they both have commented that where because no ground is to be broken or extended into unused land, that neither of them have objections. In terms of residential amenity, there aren't any third-party residences in close proximity to the structure. Highways and parking, the existing access is to be used. There's no changes to that. In terms of flooding and drainage, there is sufficient space for surface water. Net gain in landscaping is proposed for ecology. So in terms of my conclusion, it's a replacement to an existing structure which has been there for a while and is immune from enforcement. The proposed design or improvement to the existing, there are no drainage, highway concerns and no detrimental harm to residents. There are no concerns in relation to archaeology or heritage, and the recommendation is to approve the detailed landscape condition.
Thank you very much. So we've got no registered speakers, so we go straight to the discussion. Who'd like to kick off, please? Yes, Councillor Wisdom.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a valued local facility, and they're trying to improve things on the site. So I don't really see a problem, if I'm entirely honest, and I would recommend grant.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Wheatley.
I was just going to.
I'm going to second
that. Yeah.
Anyone want to make any further comments before we go to the vote? Yes, Councillor Leather.
Well, yeah, the footprint of what's proposed looks to be on the same footprint of what of what was there. It'll be an improvement because it's a bit of an eyesore now, what's there now. And I see there is a landscaping condition to be submitted, so yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Thank you very much. So we've got no further comments. It has been proposed by councillor Whitaker, seconded by councillor Wheatley, that the application is approved and that is subject to a landscaping condition, yes?
Condition 3.
Condition 3, yeah, thank you very much. So we now go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Haynes.
For.
Councillor Heppel.
For.
Councillor Leather.
Or
Councillor Locke.
4.
Councillor Bushby.
Or,
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Or
Councillor Wheatley.
For.
Councillor Whitaker. 4. Unanimous to
Thank you very
approve,
much.
Chair.
Okay, so moving on, application 1/0403/2024/QL. Proposal is demolition of existing agricultural barns and the erection of one dwelling along with public pedestrian.
Can I just say that's on pages 43 to 63 of your agenda? And are there any declarations of interest, please? The officer will now give the report.
Okay, so the proposal is for two-storey, four-bed dwelling with attached garage and outside kitchen area. The proposed ground floor footprint of the building measures approximately 330 square metres.
I'm sorry to interrupt, can you all hear or
No,
not?
not
No. Can I suggest that the planning officer sits on that middle table and speak directly into the microphone?
Okay, so yeah, two-storey, four-bed dwelling with attached garage and outside kitchen area. Proposed footprint measures 330 square metres. The first floor balcony is on the southern end, is about 6 metres in width, and there's glazing on the southern and eastern sides. Ground floor, I'll go on to say why that's relevant, but the existing access is to be filled and a new access to the northwest, which involves 14 metres of hedge bank to be removed. There's parking for 4 cars turning area, and the applicant is proposing a footpath to the school on the east of the site. Yeah, so this is Monkley, it's a village in the local plan. However, the site is just outside of the settlement boundary. Next slide, please. This is the location. Next slide, please. This is showing it's just outside of the settlement boundary, Monkley Village. The pink is an allocation which has approval for 9 dwellings. Next slide, please. Existing site plan showing the 2 agricultural buildings and a TPO tree. Next slide, please. Proposed block plan. Next slide, please. And proposed site plan. Next slide, elevations. And next slide, please. So these are photos that the agents provided of the existing barns. And aerial photos.
Sorry, could you speak into the microphone?
Okay, next slide, please. Photos from on the east showing winter and summer. Next slide, please. Views from Torrington Commons. Next slide, please. I'll just put this on to show the existing situation and hopefully some 3D visuals from the agent. What the proposal will look like. Next slide, please. So material considerations is covered in my report in great detail. I'll just cover a quick summary. So the principle, Monkley is a village in the local plan. The site is outside of the settlement boundary of that.
council has a 5-year supply, so in accordance with planning law, development must be determined in accordance with the development plan. There is no fallback position. The barns are not capable of conversion. And there is no in-principle support for an open market dwelling in this location. 3 dwellings were previously approved, that's expired now, and that was in a time when the council couldn't demonstrate private supply. Character and appearance, as explained in my report, the footprint is 330 square metres. This is like nothing else in the area, and the form and the scale, I have concluded, the form and the scale is out of character with other residential forms in the settlement. Therefore, one of the reasons for refusal is poor layout, form and scale. There's also a reason for refusal on landscape. The site, it has been talked about before in past applications, is the backdrop to the church. The church is an important feature in the landscape because of the scale, mass and design of the building. Officers, myself and the conservation officer feel that it's not appropriate in scale, mass and design. It doesn't respect the landscape character. That also links into the impact on the listed building, which is Grade 1 church to the south. As I say, the land to the north is important in wider views. There's a large amount of glazing on the southern elevation and eastern elevation, which is open on the east. And given the proximity to the church, it is considered to harm the setting. We've done a balance of using the MPPF, of whether there is a public benefit, and we concluded that the provision of the school footpath doesn't override these concerns. In terms of archaeology, it does lie in an area of potential archaeology. So 2 suggested conditions are recommended, and a written scheme of investigation would be submitted. In terms of trees, there's a TPO on the site, an arboricultural survey has been submitted, which looks at the work, how the construction would be carried out in order to not harm the TPO tree. Access, parking and highway, new access is proposed. Devon County Council have been consulted and refer the opposite to standing advice, but considering that on the previous 3 dwellings there wasn't an issue, highways wouldn't be a reason for refusal. So residential amenity, there's enough internal space and light. There's no overlooking into neighbouring properties, and conditions could be added for the hours of work, contamination and landscaping. In terms of flood risk, there's low risk of flooding here, and the applicant's proposing green roofs and surface water drainage on the site. In terms of ecology, no data was actually submitted for the biodiversity net gain, so I couldn't check the figures properly. So that is a reason for refusal. But the applicant is proposing to improve the hedgerows with native species and provide bat and bird boxes. There probably would be a net gain, it's just that I didn't have the information is required. So my recommendation, summarise, there's no harm to the amenities of neighbouring properties. It's acceptable in terms of access, parking and highway, impact on protected species, drainage and flood risk. However, it is contrary to the council's spatial strategy in that it's located outside of the defined settlement boundary and is considered to not be in keeping with the character and appearance of the settlement and surrounding area. It would result in a less than substantial harm on the Grade 1 listed church. However, in that circumstance, we look at whether there's proposed public benefit, and we don't believe that it would deliver enough benefit to outweigh the harm identified. Given this, the officer recommendation is one of
refusal.
Thank you very much. So I'll now go to the public speakers list. Our first public speaker is Mr. Christopher Beer, please. Are you speaking officially on behalf of the parish council?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Christopher Beer. I'm here as Monkley Parish Council Chairman, also a resident of Monkley Parish for the last 40 years. I also worked within these barns leading up to the farmer's tragic accident in 2003. The main reason for the barns became derelict and subsequently sold in about 2004. The location and state of deterioration of the barns have proved unviable for any agricultural purpose for any local farmer. Moving forward to 2017, Monkley Parish Council, along with 10 other residents, including Monkley School, objected to the previous outline planning application following a very busy meeting regarding these matters. The current application for one house and a pathway to be created for access to and from the school to the churchyard to the rear of the entrance of the school would enhance safety of the children at all times, and in particular both ends of the day when the walking bus is in motion. Monkley Parish Council has attended various meetings with the church in the last 6 weeks over fears the church could close through lack of attendance. At present, the school uses the church during school times, but access can be an issue. The proposed pathway has potential to ease access and enhance footfall through the church doors to potentially prolong the lifespan of the church and community use. This application for one household will also reduce the traffic count substantially. Monkley School head teacher objected to the outline planning application in 2017 due to fears traffic affecting the walking bus safety. The same head teacher has now given her full support for the current application, with the footpath being a key factor to this. It is worth noting the applicants are a local family with 3 children that attend the school. They will only purchase the site on approval of this proposal. We as a parish council have had concerns that if this application is not approved, a developer could gain permission for a higher number of units, which could result in the loss of community goodwill and the loss of a chance of a pathway for the parish. You will notice Monkley Parish Council submitted a second support letter. The reason for this, the resubmitted drawings, which show a reduction in height, overall mass of the building, along with significantly less windows to reduce light spill as requested by officers on withdrawal of the first application. This received an identical response in each case. We as a parish council were unsure if there had been an oversight with this response. We fully understand the site is on paper in open countryside. However, boots on the ground tell us this plot is clearly within the beating heart of the village. We as a parish council, along with some 20 support letters from local residents, strongly support this application, and we are deeply concerned a refusal will have a detrimental effect on the village and our community.
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next public speaker is Emily Cox, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Emily, and my husband Ian and I have made this application for our family home. We have long-standing historic ties to the 4 parishes that include Monkley, having married and had our children all christened at St Swithin's in Littleham, where we have lived for 10 years. My great-grandfather, Jack Blight, was the Monkley blacksmith in the early 1900s. Both my grandparents attended Monkley School, and now our 3 children attend in nursery, reception and class 1. Both Ian and I are heavily involved with fundraising for the school. When we began using the walking bus, we noticed the derelict barns, and alongside other parents were concerned at the school closures and the lack of outdoor play due to the high level of risks that these barns pose. For ourselves and for our neighbourhood, we decided to try to be a change for good. This is the second application we have made, having taken all feedback we received from officers and drastically amending our design. This has included reducing the building height to be lower than our neighbours, ensuring no impact to the wider landscape, adding louvers to windows, and removing the barrel vaulted barn. We are increasing the distance between buildings and the church by 17 metres, therefore improving the church's setting. Changing 2 barns that haven't been in use for 20 years to a high-quality, sustainable family home reduces the existing structure by 50%, and the scale of the first floor is smaller in 2 volumes that relate in both size and alignment with the adjacent properties. For context, the developed property opposite is larger in footprint and was reduced by just 20%. Our home has been designed with the community and the environment at its heart, and as echoed consistently in statements of support from the public, our design is sympathetic with the village. We have carefully chosen materials to reflect local agricultural buildings and the neighbouring stone walls of the farm and church. We are keen on being as sustainable as possible. The flat roof allows us to include solar panels and green roofs, and we will use an air source heat pump. We will protect the beautiful oak tree and increase the biodiversity net gain by 150% by planting quality hedgerow and meadow grass. Our family home will be self-built by ourselves using local tradespeople, and we will be sponsoring a young adults apprenticeship with Petroc to qualify as a trained carpenter. A new family in the village will further support the economy of the pub and garage, as well as the village hall's regular events. Having 1 house as opposed to 3 will reduce the environmental impact. Our community is fully behind our proposal, and we have spoken with all neighbours, the parish council and wider community, and not one person has an objection. The outline application for 3 houses that was approved received 26 letters of objection and no support whatsoever. Our proposal has received...
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Yes. Our proposal has received 23 letters of support and not a single objection. We were advised that the committee report contained errors and inconsistency, which we have outlined in the response that is available today. I urge you to please approve this application and turn 2 dangerous derelict barns into a high-quality home for our growing family and provide a safe passage for all children in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Our next speaker is Mr. Mike Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mike Kelly. I'm speaking in support of the proposal. I've known the applicant Emily for many years. And I wish to address in particular reason 1 in relation to the principle of development and to provide some reassurance to members regarding that particular issue. So thank you for the opportunity to address committee this morning. You will have received a copy of a detailed response to the agenda report. I'm not going to refer to that this morning, but reason 1 states that as the site falls outside the development boundary for Monkley, and as the planning authority can demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, then the application should be refused. In fact, the words, I think, for the officer, it falls just outside the settlement boundary. However, with respect, reliance on the planning authority being able to demonstrate a housing land supply as a reason for refusal in instances such as this is contrary to appeal decisions determined by the planning inspectorate, of course, and it's disappointing that although these cases were detailed in the planning statement that accompanies the present application, no reference appears to have been made to these in the agenda report. These are important material considerations. One of those appeal decisions reads, and I quote, irrespective of whether the 5-year housing land supply figure is met or not, the National Planning Policy Framework does not suggest that this has to be regarded as a ceiling or an upper limit on permissions. A second appeal decision, also noted in the planning statement, states, there is nothing in the National Planning Policy Framework to suggest that the existence of a 5-year supply should be regarded as a cap on further development. These are recent appeal decisions. You will know that the National Planning Policy Framework is a material consideration in planning decisions. It's actually set out on the agenda report to that effect. And the appropriate approach to housing land supply and to development boundaries has been further emphasised in a very recent appeal decision dated earlier this month, the 4th of July. That's not in the planning statement, but I have the relevant paragraph here. Fundamentally, this is the inspector's appeal decision. Fundamentally and very importantly, a 5-year supply should not be regarded as a cap on development, rather a minimum requirement of national policy. It should not preclude further development in appropriate circumstances. And this very recent appeal decision then goes on to state, and this is directly relevant in terms of development boundaries, there is no real
Can I
tangible.
ask you to wind up, please? You've had 3 minutes.
There is no real tangible land use planning harm that flows from the proposal's location outside the development boundary. It follows that the only harm in terms of principle is the site's location on, the inspector's terms, the wrong side of the development boundary. In these appeal decisions, no harm was identified and planning permission was granted on appeal. And I would put to you that the correct approach in terms of principle is reflected in these recent appeal decisions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker, our planning manager will read out an email from Councillor Phil Pennington, who is the ward member.
Thank you for listening to my representation. This application is another which appears to demonstrate the need for a small local community to move forward with sensible development and apparent difference with the North Devon and Torridge local plan. The site is a redundant and derelict agricultural building which appears at times, in particular when high winds occur, to be at risk of falling over or damaging neighbouring properties. The primary school playground is northeast of the site. I understand has had to close the playground. The present use remains agricultural. However, given the changes in farming practices, the difficulties of access with large machinery demonstrates the need for a redesignation of use for this site. Furthermore, the site is a place of sadness due to a loss by accident of the farmer. It would be good to see the building replaced by something far positive. I would further add that there is absolute and total support from the community to this application. There has been no objections, many in support. The parish council have sent in 2 comments with a myriad of reasons why this application is beneficial. Referring to the reasons given for refusal, 1, yes, it's technically outside the development boundary for monthly. However, when walking the area, it definitely forms part of the built environment. 2, 3 and 4. Refusal appears to be centred on policies STO4 and DMO4 design. So much in these policies can be seen as subjective. There is wiggle room for debate. The applicant has even offered a green roof. Policy DM27 appears ruled out because of clause C. However, much of the rest would appear to support. Issues of viewpoints at Torrington Common and Whittleston Priory seem overplayed. Biodiversity net gain appears to have addressed in the first planning statement supplied by the applicant's agent. In light of the above statement, I make the following submission. Whilst I understand the reasons for refusal, there appears to be a complete lack of the ability to have insight for the needs of Monkley. The site is no longer agricultural. To put livestock back in the middle of the built-up area will result in future nuisance problems. The developer has sought to work sympathetically with the surroundings. The church, the primary school, and residents will all benefit. To put things in rugby terms, as asked by many referees, is there any reason why you cannot award a try? I do remain with an open mind, but given all the evidence before me, I am strongly disposed the application should be granted. Please ask yourself when making your decision what the future looks like in 5 years' time. Thank you for your attention.
Right, that's the last of our speakers, so I'll throw the matter. Yes, Councillor Heppel.
Thank you, Chair. I did call by the site this morning and I forgot that it was the schools were closed. I was expecting a huge amount of children and cars, but it was deserted. Yeah, theoretically, the site is outside the village settlement boundary, but logically, it should be within, surely. I don't understand why it is not, why it is, that little section is outside. It's an application which is supported by the parish council, it's supported by the school, it's supported by the ward councillor. There are no objections to the application. I think a lot of the objections are subjective in terms of spatial strategy and out of character. I personally like the design, and I'm fully supportive. I would move, I would happily move that we grant consent.
You will have to come up with some.
I know, you said that, I will.
Councillor Whittaker, I think you were next.
Oh, was I?
Yeah,
No,
no.
I'm all right. I'm very happy to be next, yes. I mean, I had a look at it the other day. I went out a couple of days ago and had a look, and it's definitely part of the built environment. It's definitely part of the village. You can, you know, I'm with Councillor Heppel. I cannot understand why that little bit was left out of the settlement boundary, quite honestly. Everybody is happy for this particular design to be built. Everybody's happy that this site is developed for accommodation rather than some sort of agricultural development. And I can't see actually that would work in any case, because it's right in the middle of where the children go to school and where all the other people, many of the other people in the village live. So, you know, I mean, I'm with Councillor Heppel. I mean, I just don't understand why, I understand why it's got to be refused, because it's part of policy. I understand that quite clearly. But in every other sense, and there are no other objections to it apart from policy, why it should be refused. So I would like to see it granted.
Is that the second of that proposal?
If you like it.
Councillor Haynes.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the other two speakers that even though it's outside the boundary, I think it should be a candidate for a development. I have been to the site and had a look around. My concern ties in with the officer. I don't think the design reflects the sensitivity of a very historic site, and I don't think it pays any compliments to the church either. The historic site there, which I think it's called Montley Barton, is a cluster of stone houses, traditional vernacular, with pitched roofs, stone, small windows. In my mind, this design, the house is too large. It's flat roofed, which doesn't reflect the other buildings, and a lot of glazing as well, again, which doesn't reflect the vernacular, which I thought was supposed to be a planning consideration. I'd also like to refer to the public meeting in 2017, when there was an outline application for 3 houses on the site. There was huge emphasis there on any building reflecting the character of the existing houses, and in terms of its impact on the church. I'm just sorry to say I can't agree that the proposed design fulfills those criteria. I'm also slightly concerned about the impact on traffic. If I think it's a provision for 4 cars in the building. I'm not quite sure. I stand corrected. I fully appreciate the offer of the footpath. I think that is a benefit, obviously, but I just wonder if there was a better, more sensitive design that came forward, whether that footpath could still be associated with a new application. Thank you.
And good, Councillor Busby, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. It's been said on numerous occasions that we should take the view of parish councils seriously into view when we judge any of these applications. I know Councillor Leather has said that on several occasions, and I totally agree with them. The parish council chairman, spoke in glowing terms and glowing support for this application, as has the local school. you know, there's so much that I see in this application that it's just got so much going for it. And I'm, you know, I agree with what's been said, other than the fact that it's slightly outside of the development boundary line, everything else, as far as I'm concerned, including the design, I love the design of it. I mean, it's modern, it's you know, it's on a large site, which I think is a real bonus. That's easily accommodates the, you know, the car parking issue. The buildings that are proposed are considerably smaller than the barns that I went in yesterday morning and had a look. I mean, they're big barns, and it's a big footprint. So what's proposed is considerably smaller than what's there currently. And it tidies the whole area up. There is so much planning gain in this application that, you know, it's almost disappointing that the officers are recommending refusal, but I can understand the reasons why they are. But I would certainly give it my support because I think it's a great development.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, like Councillor Haynes, I'm not sure it's a design that I would choose, but I agree with Councillor Bushby. We've got to listen to people of the parish. It's not just one or two people in favour of it. There's large numbers in favour of it. And if the people of Monkley are happy with the design, I don't think we should quibble over it too much. Right. I think it's a great improvement. It's the fact it's outside the village development boundary is illogical. It's enveloped on three sides and it's very much part of the built area. So I'm happy to support it.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor Hempel.
You want my reasons?
Well, I'll just say something quickly, then you can come up with your main reason.
Please do.
Yeah, I mean, design is always going to be a subjective issue because what I like, you might not like, so it's always up for debate, that is. But I think one of the important parts of this application is in the Historic England's report. It says no objections on historic grounds. If there is any degree of harm to the church, this must be counterbalanced by any public benefits. And that is exactly what this application does. Yes, Councillor.
I was just going to put forward my reasons would be the public benefits outweigh any adverse effects. Is that a planning
Yeah.
justification?
So just to sort of remind members that your statutory duty is, your starting point is the development plan. So section 38(6) says application should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So material considerations are key here. I don't consider the point put forward by the speaker that it's fine to approve things outside of development boundaries. There's not a cap on numbers. I think the point here is your statutory duty. You have a policy, STO 7, this is in conflict with. So we would need clear material considerations. And Councillor Heppel, you've mentioned the public benefit. There is also less than substantial harm to a grade 1 listed building. So the public benefit also test applies to that. So weighing that public benefit against the harm to the listed building, but also the material considerations that outweigh the conflict with the established policy. So I think you've kind of got there, Councillor Heppel, with what you're saying, but I don't know if you just want, in light of that advice, just to comment on that. One of the refusal reasons is around design. Yes, it is subjective. The officers and conservation officers' positions are very clear. Their views that this isn't an appropriate design in this location, but it's open for members to take a differing view. There is also a refusal reason relating to biodiversity net gain. The applicant submitted, I think, on Tuesday, the case officer, the metric, which had been missing from the submission. So it was very late in the day, but we have looked at it. And I think the officer's view would be that there is sufficient detail there to apply the B&G mandatory informative. So that reason could then fall away. So I think I would put it back to Councillor Heppel. The material considerations need to be clearly set out to go against the development plan. Also the public benefit in light of the less than substantial harm to a grade 1 listed building. Hope that helps.
I've got lots of hands up there. Councillor Leather was first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I don't know if members have printed off or read this cost report. There's a lot of information for the committee in there. And as Helen's just said, yeah, we start with our policies unless material considerations direct us elsewhere. And now there are two for me. One is the footpath that's proposed, and that can be a legal condition attached to any grant of planning permission. That is a material consideration and important one for me.
Yeah.
And I think that complies with SDO 10 transport strategy. Brackets 2d about pedestrian access. And the other one is a material consideration is the fallback position of this site. The fallback position is this could be carried on as an agricultural site at some time in the future. You could repair the barns or put new barns on there. And that is a fallback position, which I think would be detrimental to Montclair if that happened again. So that is a material consideration. It's also, for me, a brownfield site. It's had previous development on it. And I've searched in our policies for SDO common sense. I couldn't find it. But perhaps we will have that one day when we have a new plan.
You might have to look a long time for that, I think.
Yeah. I'm wholeheartedly behind this application, Chair. It should be good. And also,
Councillor-
I've mentioned NPPF. The NPPF, making effective use of land. Paragraph 1, 2, 3 there. It fully complies with that. This is making proper use of the land.
Councillor Hames, you were next.
Yeah, I was just querying the biodiversity results. Should they have been included in the documents for consultation or not? Through you, Chair, to Helen Smith.
So there was a report that contained all of the information. However, I don't understand it. The metric, was it saying? The metric wasn't there. It's technical information that supports the position put forward. I wouldn't consider in this case sort of this from a judicial review point of view and members making a decision without that specific metric having been subject to consultation would be my advice. But of course, ideally we would have received it up front, and that's something to make sure happens.
So you're happy that there'll be an increase in biodiversity?
Yeah, it's as per what's set out in the document that's submitted. I think the metric was received on Tuesday. The percentages are. It's hedgerow and habitat units, and it's significantly above the 10% for both of them. So given we're now in a mandatory net gain world, it would involve the automatic application of the informative requiring the biodiversity net gain plan to be submitted. So that's mandatory.
Okay. Councillor Bushby, you had your hand up.
Well, it's almost irrelevant now that Councillor Leather is summed up, but I would just want to point out what Helen was talking about the church, the Historic England comment. It says here the church is at risk of closure and is likely to be added to the National Heritage at Risk Register. It goes on to say thinking about the community and its needs holistically would therefore be beneficial, and that's exactly what the ward member and the chairman of the parish council we're talking about. We're talking about a holistic view here about the community and about the village. That's what's important here.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you. I'm more than mildly curious because the applicant agent suggested quite strongly that had we refused this application, it would have been overturned at appeal. Am I right in thinking that, Helen? Did he make sense to you? He made sense to me, but then I'm a novice compared to you.
Yeah, certainly it did make sense. I think the confusion was around reference to 5-year land supply and the refusal reason. I think the case officer has included that in light of the planning history, perhaps partly because there was a permission previously at a time when the tilted balance was put in. I think the advice I've given around section 38.6 and the development plan being the starting point is the right and sound basis. And I think a refusal would be sound on that basis. The appeal decisions or examples of referred to, that we do occasionally see appeal decisions where inspectors say, well, there's no harm, it's outside the development boundary, but there's no harm, so it helps with housing numbers, it's approved, but that certainly wouldn't be the approach I would encourage members to take. The development plan is the starting point.
But there could have been a risk.
My view, no, I think it's a
curious.
sound officer recommendation, bearing in mind the duties before you as a committee, that, you know, I think it's less likely than not that an inspector would have disagreed with that basis for the recommendation, would be my view. But obviously you're looking to recommend an approval.
Chair,
Yes, councillor Neville.
just one point that councillor Ames mentioned the biodiversity net gain, but this site's a self-build site, and therefore it's exempt from requirements to include a biodiversity net gain calculation. However, one was carried out to prove the ecological enhancements proposed by the project. The Excel file for the metric has been submitted to the documents. I think Helen mentioned that.
Right, councillor Edward, you come up with all your definite STs, whatever, DMs?
No, I haven't.
Well, I think it's quite clear from the committee which way we want to go with this.
Yeah.
So we really have got to come up with some firm policy references to approve it.
All material
All
considerations.
material considerations. I think councillor Leather suggested STO 10.
Yeah, SEO 10, brackets 2D. Development quality strategic recreational routes and local pedestrian, cycle and bridleway networks. That's what that refers to. And also STO 7, brackets 4, which is the countryside beyond local centres, villages and rural settlements. That goes on to talk about local economic and social needs, rural building reuse and development, which is necessarily restricted to a countryside location. But I think this fits in.
So I think we've got to stress, you know, the public benefits outweigh any adverse harm. So does STO 7 cover, STO 10, is that covered?
I think the material considerations are key here because there is conflict with STO 7 and identified conflict with heritage policies and the NPPF test is at play. So it is, I think it's simple as articulating that those material considerations outweigh the policy conflict and also the public benefit outweighing the less than substantial harm to the heritage asset. I think that's
what you meant to say.
Thank you for adding words to my search for common sense.
So councillor, well, you've heard what the planning officer.
Yeah, I'm happy with
So
that.
you're happy to go ahead with your proposal on those grounds?
Yep.
Yes, Helen wants to come
Sorry, I
back.
think I was going to go through.
Conditions.
All right.
Yeah, I was.
Conditions. One that I think we should put in is about this footpath, legal condition for that. And that the footpath's constructed before any occupation of the house occurs.
Yeah, I'll come on to that. So I think with the footpath, given it's being offered as a public benefit and for use, it would need to be subject to a legal agreement. You can require that use by condition. So you would need a legal agreement to secure that with the appropriate trigger. In terms of conditions, the time condition, plans conditions, the case officer mentioned archaeology conditions that were recommended. I would encourage a condition seeking material samples, particularly where you've got stonework. Important to see sort of a sample of that. This needs to be done to a high quality. So materials, landscaping. I don't know if the scheme is detailed enough to approve a plan or to require detailed landscaping with trigger for that being implemented on site. Contamination and hours of construction as raised by the Environmental Protection Officer. Bird boxes. Well, the B&G is an interesting one. So it's either that it does require B&G. I don't think it was, the description of development is not as a self-build. So the options before you are, yes, we apply the informative requiring the biodiversity net gain plan, or we apply the self-build condition, which requires it to meet that criteria.
So could we apply both of those conditions and
Well, if it's self-build, then B&G would be exempt from B&G. So I think, I don't know, I could take advice from the case officer on what exactly is proposed here, really. The only other condition would be around just ensuring access and parking is in place before occupation.
Tree TPO.
Tree protection measures for the TPO tree. as well. But I think we do need to be clear on the B and G as opposed to self-build position. Debbie, do you know? It's not proposed as a self-build, right?
No.
None of the documents did it say. But it is.
Can we delegate that to the officers and to sort out the?
Yeah.
So everyone's happy with that then, that it has been proposed by councillor Hempel, seconded by, yes, councillor James.
Yeah, the landscaping and the hedges, they're to be there in perpetuity then, aren't they? Is that the condition? Yeah.
Yeah, they would be, and they form the B and G, so there would be then monitoring that goes with that.
There's already.
Right, so I'll try again. It has been proposed by councillor Hempel, seconded by councillor Whitaker, that the application is approved, quoting all the references we have discussed, and that conditions will be agreed between the officers and the chair and vice chair. So can we have a vote, please, for approval?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Haynes.
Again.
Councillor Heppel.
For.
Councillor Leather.
For.
Councillor Locke.
For.
Councillor Bushby.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Wheatley.
For.
Councillor Whitaker. For. That's 8 for, 1 against, Chair.
Thank you very much.
One day. No one agreed with it.
Right, so going on to application F. Application 1/1225, the solar farm at Ebony. And it is on pages 64. I think we're having a 5-minute comfort break. Right, then, I think we're all back ready to start again. So this application is on pages 64, 108 of your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No, so I now ask the officer to give the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, that's much better.
Hi members, anyone watching on YouTube, etc. My name is Chris Eveley, the Development Manager. Covering this application for my colleague, Pete Stapley. Apologies for that dinging. This application is for the construction and operation of a grid-connected solar farm, including battery storage and associated infrastructure, as well as biodiversity enhancements through landscaping. Slide. Verbal update. So there's been an additional objection. It talks about the nature of development in the countryside, the end of life of solar panels, battery storage being a fire risk, impact on tourism, and the overall numbers of solar farms in Devon. Mr. Stapley considers that the above comments have previously been addressed in the officer's reports or are not included planning considerations, and that no additional comments are required. Next slide. So this is an aerial photo. You can see High Vic there off to the north. Liverton Golf Club is there to northeast. And then this is parcel 5 agricultural fields. Highways to the south. Next slide. Pretty much showing the same thing really, but just not a satellite photo. Next slide. And then slightly more zoomed in. So you can see all 5 fields, Liverton there, off to the northeast. This numbers the 5 fields, if you couldn't count. Next slide. This shows the topography, so it's sort of high either side, with coming down to a low point in the middle, and as you get with low points, there's sort of a stream at the bottom with some trees. To the top, sort of northeast corner, you can see some blotches of red. So that's the nearest neighbour, and that's listed building, which is referred to within the officer report. Next slide. This shows solar panels, the substation, and the battery storage there to the south is sort of hatched. That doesn't actually form part of this detailed design, so we don't know what the battery storage is going to be, and there's a condition in there which requires those further details, but we do know that that's the location of it. Next slide. This is the landscape character types. It's within the Devon landscape character types. It's farmed, lowland, moorland, and culm grassland. And within the officer report, Mr. Stapley details what the special characteristics of that are. Next slide. That's just showing public rights of way. So there's no actual public rights of way surrounding the site. And you can sort of see in the top right-hand corner, there's a green and a red and a pink path. So they're the nearest public rights of way. Next slide. These show the assessed dwellings in terms of glint and glare. Next slide. This is Natural England's agricultural land classification, which details the site as poor and grade 4. You see in the officer report that actually we've done more site-specific soil modelling of the site, and it's a mixture of mostly 3A and 3B. So some good, some moderate, and some poor as well as in there. Next slide. This is highways access, viewing to the east, sites in there on your left with sheep and grass behind the gateway. Next slide. Looking the other way, up the road, you can see sort of standard Devon hedge banks around the site, and the landscaping scheme shows these being built up to, for a minimum of 3 meters, height, that will be. Next slide. And then this is looking into the site. So you can see how it kind of dips in the middle, and you've got, trees within that central point and a stream, and those trees, are going to be retained, by the scheme, and the topography is apparent from that photo. Next slide. This is looking back towards the highways access, and again, you can see the topography sloping up, to the distance. Next slide. This is in field 1. You can see it's, moorland, kind of grassland, or common grassland, and that's looking south. Next slide. This is field 1 again, looking northeast and east. Next slide. Field 2, so this is from the top sort of point from field 2, looking back down across the site, and also out of the site. Next slide, please. And then this is west, out of the site. I'm going to rattle through these because most of you have been on the site visit. So, but this is field 3, looking within the site. Most of the important landscaping views are going to be actually looking in rather than looking out, because this won't be a public view. If that makes sense. There'll be solar panels. So the most important ones are the views looking in. Next slide. Field 4, looking southwest. Next slide, please. Field 5, one's viewing east. That eastern point is perhaps slightly interesting. So that section won't have solar panels. It's from approximately there downwards, towards the neighbouring property, and that will be landscaped with tree planting. Next slide. Again, field 5, looking back the other way, sort of across the site in more general terms. Next slide. So this is from outside of the site, looking across. So you can see the site in the background there. Once you get across the first field, that's where the site starts. Next slide. Again, this is showing landscape views from the northeast, and another one from the northeast where the site isn't visible. You've seen obviously reports the site isn't very visible from the surrounding landscape due to existing hedgerows and topography, but where you do get views into the site is in field gateways, etc. Next slide. So this is the landscape view again, from either side of the site. You've got those maps of the arrows, which are quite useful in terms of showing you where the photo is taken from. Next slide. So from a long distance view, site's not actually visible from this point. Next slide. So this is, you can see on the map there, almost at the entrance to the site. So this is covering most of the site, and then the application site covers up full width. Next slide. Again, same viewpoint, the site is zoomed out, so you've got where the application site is. Next slide. I'm showing similar, but this is to the east, looking back across. Next slide. This is showing Dadlin's Farm, which is, I believe, the grade 2 listed property. Shows a high Bickerton in the background, so that gives you an idea of the list of buildings that are of consideration, and then siting on the left. Next slide. This is from a distance view. You see the approximate application site within view. Next slide. Again, the approximate standard application site within view. Next slide, please. Same one, but zoomed out. It's from further away, so the site's not visible. It's just from the landscape visual impact assessment, I believe. But it's useful to know where the site is and isn't visible from. And what they effectively show is that the site is visible from the roads directly surrounding the site, but then as you go further into the landscape, it's not really visible at all. So next slide. Again, site not visible, mainly due to topography. Next slide. So we're kind of doing a clockwise loop here. We're up near Highgate here, site not visible again. This is the site layout. So the access is a single access point to the south. There's highways throughout the site, which will be retained. There's inverters in the substation, and then fence surrounding it. Next slide, please. Box standard view of solar panel arrays, really. I think you probably all know what they look like, but these are the plans. Next slide. Some elevations of solar panels. Next slide. This is how they're fixing. So the large majority will be type 1 and type 2, which are your usual solar panels. So without any concrete benefits. There might be a small section on site if there's, it depends on archaeology, but around a small trench, I think it's trench 49, that requires some concrete base, but it will be a tiny insignificant section. So the large majority of the site will have the usual single post or table post types that can just be removed, and then the land gets back to agriculture at the end of the 40 years. Next slide. This shows plan of the substation and the road, etc. Next slide. And then again, this is what a substation looks like. It's probably more visually intrusive than the panels themselves, due to the overall height of the substation is higher than the panels. Next slide. This is your typical security fence. So the main idea of the security fence is to stop deer and livestock rubbing up against the panels and causing damage. So you see it does actually have a gap underneath, which can facilitate movements of small mammals, etc. Maybe a small person, probably not. Next slide, please. These are your inverter plans and elevations. Again, these are subject to a condition. Next slide. This shows site access, single point of access. This is the landscaping plan. So you see that there's the majority of the existing hedgerows being retained or enhanced. There'll be some wildflower meadows, tree planting, etc. So there is quite considerable biodiversity net gain which arises from this scheme, which is detailed in the officer report. Next slide, please. Again, probably seen this slide a lot now, but this is just showing where the access is, where the substation and battery storage is, etc. The more detailed landscaping. I think there's a couple more detailed landscaping plans as well. So if we split through those, and this top corner, and then the final one. This shows, this one's probably the most important because it shows that woodland planting between the site and the neighbouring site, which is the building. Next slide. This is a sort of concept visual. However, it's not necessarily that accurate because the hedge is to be growing to a minimum of 3 meters and the solar panel height is a maximum of 3 meters. So in theory, if the hedge goes up, you won't really see it from adjacent to the site. If that makes sense. Slide. Same thing applies with the hedge. That's clearly not 3 meters in height. So you should have more screening. These are your development policies. I won't go through them, presumably you've read the report, what the policies relate. Next slide. These are in material planning considerations. You've got the principle of development, agricultural land classification, impact on landscape character, and that's split out into a few different points. Impact on historic environment, residential amenity, security and public safety, access and highway safety, construction phase provisions, surface water drainage and flood risk, wildlife and ecology, and then the planning balance and conclusion. So your officer is recommending on balance that you do approve, subject to a variety of different conditions. I'll pass back to you, Chair, to introduce any speakers, and then hopefully I can answer any questions that you have.
Yes, thank you very much. Just before I go on to the public speakers, for the benefit of all members present, I'd just like to say that all members of the committee attended an excellent and detailed virtual site visit. So going on to public speakers, please. Our first public speaker is Mr. Leslie Parton, please.
Morning. I thank you for the opportunity of addressing you, but I'd like to voice my objections to their 73-acre solar farm being proposed at Everley Down on the following grounds. Firstly, I live in the parish of Roborough and currently only 3 kilometres away. We already have a 40-acre solar farm at Upcott Barton in Beeford. There's a massive 160-acre solar farm at Cold Harbour in Ashrainey, which was recently permitted using delegated powers. And if this proposed 73-acre solar farm at Everley Down goes ahead, the parish of Roborough will have 3 solar farms in close proximity to its parish boundaries. And I believe that Roborough Parish should not be subjected to 3 solar farms on its doorstep. By allowing such a development, it does not follow the planning policy DM08A, which states that development should be of an appropriate scale and recognises and respects undesignated landscape, considering its cumulative impact. Secondly, the proposal would occupy 73 acres of agricultural land, 60% which is grade A, that's the best and most versatile, the remainder being grade 3B, moderate. There's no exceptional reason for this agricultural land to be used for the proposed industrial application. Thirdly, the grade 2 listed barn is within 3 metres of its field boundary and within 5 metres of a grade 2 listed farmhouse and associated barns mentioned in the Domesday Book. Torridge District Council were provided with a back survey on the grade 2 listed barn on their application conversion. It concluded that the proposal would harmfully impact the important wildlife corridor stretching from High Bickington Community Woodland through woods and coppices towards Roborough and neighbouring villages. Fourthly, there'd be a significant adverse noise impact when assessed in accordance with British Standard 4142 to Glenmore cottages and surrounding dwellings, as a result of the BESS units serving the proposed development. Although mitigation in the form of a barrier has been proposed to reduce the noise level, the noise is likely to be an irritating and perceptible nuisance in such a low background locality. Fifth, drainage for the proposed application does not satisfactorily conform to policy ST03 of North Devon and Torridge local plan. The solar panels, BESS and the substation surface water management system should attenuate all of the surface water runoff generated up to and included the 1 in 100 year rainfall event before discharging it off-site at rates and volumes equal to the site's greenfield performance. The adjacent grade 2 property is served by a borehole and is within 25 metres of the boundary, and concerns are raised for contamination runoff from panels and proposed hard surfaces from the BESS. Finally, Historic Environment have raised an objection to the application, given the potential for the site to contain unrecorded agricultural and artifactual deposits.
Could I ask you to wind up, please?
Yeah, associated with the prehistoric or Roman British activity in surrounding landscape. This would be in accordance with the guidance policy DMO7 in the North Devon and Torridge local plan. And I thank you for listening to my objections. And I would urge you please to vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Next registered speaker is Mr. Simon Chapman, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, members and officers. Thank you for allowing the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. The application is for a solar farm comprising ground-mounted solar panels and battery storage with a generating capacity of about 28 megawatts. Permission is requested for a period of 40 years, after which it will return to its current state. The application has been made by Elgin Energy with a proven track record for developing solar parks sympathetically within the countryside across the UK and Ireland. Prior to the submission of the application, a request was made for pre-application advice to the council. Their response provided a summary of the technical information that was needed to be included with the application. During the pre-application stage, the applicant engaged with the local community and a public exhibition was held in July 2023. Following the pre-application consultation and pre-application engagement, the proposals have been amended. The application was supported by a range of technical documents in order to respond to consultee responses. This approach has meant that in terms of response from statutory consultees, there is overwhelming support for the proposals. We'd like to highlight the ongoing positive engagement that has taken place with the planning officer during the assessment of the application. In terms of the application, we'll highlight the following. The principle of solar development accords with national policies to do with a net zero and decarbonised economy, and the assessment considers this appropriate location for a solar farm. The proposals are also supported by Part 4 of Policy ST16 of the local plan. Concerns have been raised regarding the loss of agricultural land, and we would highlight that. The proposal is for temporary use. The land is used as sheep pasture, and as part of the proposal, it will continue to be used as sheep grazing. The site is outside of boundaries of sensitive designations. The solar farm would contribute to sustainable development and a reduction of CO2 emissions, which is supported by both national and local policies. The application included a landscape and visual impact assessment, which has been reviewed by an independent landscape consultant. We agree with the assessment's findings and that the proposals would not result in any significant harm or impact on designated landscape or views. The application also included a range of ecological reports, which have also been considered by an independent ecologist, who agrees that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on wildlife and ecology. The proposals would result in a significant biodiversity net gain exceeding the target gain of 10%. The findings of the archaeological trial trenchings have been considered by the County Council Historic Environments team, who are supportive of the proposals. No concerns have been raised in respect to the potential impact on built heritage assets. Once operational, the development will generate few vehicular movements. However, there will be an intense period of about 16 weeks during the construction period. Having considered the construction transport management plan, the highest authorities advised the proposal would be accepted in terms of impact on highways. In summary, the consultation responses have been supportive of the proposals. The wider benefits include contribution to supply of renewable energy, reduction of CO2 emissions, its temporary and reversible nature, allows the continuation of sheep grazing and biodiversity net gain. The benefits of the proposal are considered to be significant and outweigh the potential adverse impacts. As such, the proposal because the national local plan policies. We support the planning officer's comprehensive and robust assessment of the proposal and its recommendation approved. Thank you.
Right, that was the end of the public speakers. Now open up for discussion. Who'd like to kick off, please? Yes, Councillor Bushbury.
I'll just pick up a point that the speaker has just mentioned about the 40 years lifespan of the development, and after that's going to be reinstated as farmland. What mechanism is likely to be put in place to actually make that happen? In other words, who's going to pay for it? Because this is 73 acres of a solar farm, which is going to be, I can see in 40 years' time, very expensive to remove. How does that happen?
Yeah. Oh, he's going to go in the.
Hi members, I've got you all staring at me now. So it is covered by conditions, so it requires within 12 months before the end that they have to provide a scheme of remediation. It's pretty bog standard in terms of how that works, what the condition is, and it's generally accepted by the planning inspectorate. I'm not aware of any cases where afterwards people refuse to remove the panels and we have to then take enforcement action. What normally happens is 20 years down the line, they might say, actually, we get another 10 years out of these. Sometimes you get that 40 years increasing slightly, but usually at some point they are removed. The landowner has a lease agreement effectively, so it's in the landowner's interest within that agreement to have those solar panels removed. Otherwise, we'd be then enforcing against the landowner as opposed to, so because any enforcement is against that owner of the land. So they would, within their contractual arrangements, usually also have that. So it's covered by condition, I think it's condition 3 and 4, and then also if the landowner is sensible, they should also have that within their contract.
Councillor Hempel, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know where to start here. Just picking up on the planning officer's reference to the conditions, well, I think it's 3, 4 and 5, isn't it? Because 40 years is regarded as a temporary consent. And the reasons for those conditions read, in order to protect the visual amenity and character of the surrounding countryside. So for the next 40 years, we don't care. Is that what we're saying?
I think that's quite unfair actually, because the officer's done quite a good officer report, and also had that checked by a landscape consultant who says that actually the landscape is capable of taking that solar panel arrangement. It's not going to cause any cumulative impact. So in regards to the 3 solar panel things that are nearby, there becomes a point where you can't take any more, but it's not saying that, it's saying actually it fits quite well. So it's acknowledged as harm, but it's saying that the landscape can take that, and then in 40 years time they'll be removed and it'll be filled. So I don't think it's fair to say we're just saying yeah, this is fine. We've assessed it.
Okay, but the land classification is it what 1F? Which is yes, it's a landscape character that is highly sensitive to developments of this scale. That's what your report says, but with all due respect, your report does not refer to the scale, which is part of the Torridge's own plan or report, which is an assessment of the landscape sensitivity to onshore wind energy and field scale photovoltaic development in Torridge Council, where small is very small is up to 1 hectare, small is 1 hectare to 5 hectares, medium is 5 to 10 hectares, and large is 10 to 15 hectares. So this is much bigger than large, isn't it?
Yeah, and that assessment is actually really old now and mostly out of date.
But we're told constantly to refer to current policy. That is current policy, isn't it?
It's not necessarily our policy, is it? Because our policy is in the local plan. So what we're referring to here is the policy which relates to where are we? So that would be a supporting document, and the policy would be policy ST16, delivering renewable energy. What that says directly, let me see if it's in here. So ST16 says we support renewable energy in landscape types where landscape sensitivity is best able to accommodate them, assessing the constant landscape sensitivity assessments, and by the landscape sensitivity to accommodate the scale of the development. There's no significant impact on local amenities and the special qualities of nationally important landscape biodiversity and heritage destinations and their settings are conserved or enhanced. So we've assessed all of the relevant documents. Mr. Stapley's found that there is some harm. However, we've then had that assessed by an independent landscape consultant who concurs with their landscape and visual impact assessment and says that it's capable of taking that harm. So it's not like we're saying this isn't harmful at all. We're just saying there is some harm. It's acknowledged. It's a big solar. Like if you put solar panels in the middle of anywhere in the countryside, there will be some harm. It's whether it can take that harm is the key question, and we're saying here it can.
Well, the description of the land classification that this site falls into refers to intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, and also tranquility, remoteness, high levels of tranquility and remoteness. I would suggest that large-scale developments of this, industrial developments of this type in the countryside affect the tranquility and remoteness of the land classification.
I'm not an expert in doing LPIAs. We've employed an expert to do an LPIA review of their expert LPIA review, and they're saying it won't cause significant harm. So that's all I can suggest. You might have a different opinion, and that's fine. I would very much caution against that as a reason for refusal, but I guess we're not there in the conversation yet. But the evidence is effectively telling us can fit within that landscape. So that's all I can say. Really.
Right, councillor Thomas is next.
Thank you. As a Green, I find myself a little bit torn because I very much support the idea of renewable energy, but I do have concerns about this industrialisation of the rural landscape. Just on an observation, the report mentioned that the site was largely screened by hedgerows, which might be true at this time of year when everything is growing and it's lush. I mean, I know the area, certainly that road to the west running from, I think it's Natty Corner, going along. In the winter, when those hedgerows are cut and they're bare, you can see right across the site. So I don't think it's particularly well hidden. I'm just glancing at our strategy, and it talks about our landscape strategy for solar PV development outside the area of outside natural beauty is for a landscape with occasional solar PV developments, and the size of development should relate to landscape scale. Now, a public speaker mentioned there's already 2 other developments in the parish. This is the 3rd one, and it's of a considerable size. I mean, not really relevant to this application, but I think we should be encouraging solar panels on brownfield sites and the roofs of buildings, not sticking them across large areas of what's out a bit fairly decent farmland.
I don't know if you want me to answer that, but I will. So by all means, we encourage solar panels on buildings, brownfield land, etc. That's absolutely great. Bear in mind, this is us supplying, it's the applicant, and we have to consider the application which is applied for. So it's not like we're not encouraging it. It'd be absolutely fantastic if we could get more, but we have to ultimately consider what's in front of us. The cumulative landscape impact is considered by Mr. Stapley at part 3, impact on landscape character, and then B, cumulative landscape impact. So it sets out what the existing renewable energy developments are within 5 kilometres of the site, and then it concludes overall the developments would not result in a significant cumulative impact on the landscape character type and would not be a dominant visual feature. So that's, I can only go by what he's recommending, along with the independent landscape consultant.
Can I just interject there? We've gone over through, I need to propose and second that we continue after 3 hours. Yeah, so it's go ahead then after 3 hours. Sorry to interrupt. Have you finished, Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Leather then.
Yeah, well, I agree with, we all like renewable energy in the right place. This isn't the right place. When we had our site visit, I thought, well, this is a very visible site and it's good farmland. And I can't believe that we're even, it's been recommended to approve this site. In Torridge already, we've got 17 sites of solar installations. I don't call them farms, they're not farms, they're industrial installations. We've got 100-acre plus sites, we've got 4 in Torridge, 100 acres plus. This one falls in the 40 to 100 acres. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including this one. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 to 40 acres in Torridge. And this is beautiful landscape. And we are ruining our landscape with these. I mean, go along the road between here and Barnstable and Erin, like what an eyesore it is along there. And these are visible, they are. It's been raised about demolition of them at the end of 40 years. Well, I won't be, I know, probably most of us here won't be. The company will go bankrupt long before then, and they'll just be there for somebody else to pick up the tab and get rid of them. But they are an eyesore, and these are in the wrong place. they should be on brownfield sites or on large rooftops, and there's plenty in the Torridge area that could have them. And I'm not going to support this because I think it's detrimental. There's no economic benefit for people from them, for us. The Maypower, it says 8,500 homes, not in the winter, they certainly won't. So I just think because of the location and the detrimental impact on the environment, I cannot support it, Chair.
Councillor Hames, you were next.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm conflicted as well, really, but you have to weigh it up with the benefits, you know, the vital importance of having renewable energy. That's the point, really. I mean, if you didn't develop those fields, are they ready? Is the landscape particularly great? I mean, it's modern agriculture with bare fields and no wildlife, or huge reduction in wildlife. So I don't know, possibly you could develop 3 fields instead of 5, that would make it better, I think. Can I just ask a few questions? There's a bit of a conflict about what grade the agricultural land is. The speaker said it's 60% grade A, is it? Whereas in the report it says it's grade 3, so I need to clear that right. And also on the wildlife aspect, there were 2 reports, one from a consultant, I think, pointing out that there's no up-to-date reptile survey, so there's a need for more detail about the impact on bats and referencing badgers. And then there's the Devon Wildlife Trust objections about the lack of reptile detail, calling for a full ecological impact assessment in terms of habitat impact. What trees will be removed and how will that impact bats? Bird report insufficient. Effect on the river, and very importantly, the permeability of the site. There's a gap under the security fencing, but could badgers go under that, for instance? Obviously deer can't, but I'm concerned about the cutting off of the wildlife corridor, really. And also on the screening, will the substation and the inverters and the battery buildings be screened? Because that would have a big mitigation effect on the site in terms of visual impact. Perhaps the officer could answer those points. For you, Chair.
Yeah, you might need to remind me of them as we go along.
What grade is the land, and then there's wildlife. Thanks.
Grade land screening. Okay, so yes, it will be screened in terms of the southern part of the site. So that hedgerow is part of the landscaping scheme that is due to be built up.
Screening of the buildings, I said.
Yeah.
All the buildings to be screened, all the inverters, batteries.
The hedgerow will be between 3 and 4
that's
meters, so
screen.
that will be the screen, yes.
Okay.
In terms of the agricultural land classification, so the site is on 58% 3A. Okay, so so grade 3 is split in between A and B, rather confusingly, rather than just having 4 and 5. But there you go. So Natural England's map classifies it as all poor, although it's actually slightly better than what Natural England's map is saying. In terms of land quality, so Pete, in his principal recommendation, clarifies that quite clearly. But it's also worth noting that in recent appeals, inspectors are saying that even if the site is mainly good quality, where the intention is to keep grazing sheep, etc., which is the intention here, then that shouldn't necessarily be considered as it being just an industrial solar farm. The intention is almost like a dual use, so they're going to keep grazing livestock, going to have the solar panels, and actually there's a soil management plan in there that Pete's recommended. So the end game at 40 years time should be that you've actually got better soil quality than what you have now for future uses. So there are no concerns regarding that.
It's the 2 wildlife reports, whether their recommendations have been incorporated.
Yeah, I was flicking through to try and find it, but we hired a third party ecologist from Avondale Ecology, and they were, as Pete was going along, requesting more information, etc. How I understand it is that our ecologist we hired, it's got to a point where it's all considered fine, no impact on protected species, plus there's a considerable net gain. So from my point of view, it's fine.
So, in terms of permeability, you say small mammals, what about badgers, for instance, in terms of getting through the security fence?
I mean, badgers can get under a hedge fairly easily, burrowing, so I wouldn't have any concerns.
I mean, it's a huge area cutting off wildlife, isn't it, really?
Well, is it though? Because there is a reasonable gap under
already
the
elsewhere.
hedgerow.
Right, I think Councillor Smith is next.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to agree very much with what Councillor Leather was saying. I think a lot of these issues should be put in place in brownfield sites, and taking into account putting PVs on roofs. I'm also in a bit of a quandary, and I agree with Councillor Hames on this, because being very interested in ecology, we're a little bit torn, but I think we've also got to take into account the parish council. I sit on a parish council in Great Torrington, and we always feel that we're not really represented as well as we would like at planning. I think it's the boots on the ground. They're the people that really understand that particular area. And they're saying here that they've already got 2 very large sites and one, yet another one in the same parish. I think is too much for one parish to absorb. So it's not clear cut as far as I'm concerned, but on balance, can I just ask, did Councillor Leather recommend refusal of this or not? No.
Not at this stage.
He didn't. In which case, could I recommend proposed refusal
I'll second that, Chair.
Can we have a reason?
Yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes to come up with your policy reasons then.
Yep.
Yes, Councillor Heppel then.
Yeah, so I was just going to add that on moral grounds, I just cannot vote for approval on this, because it's 40 years, and within that 40 years, the planning policies to grant these consents for industrialisation of our farmland will be seen as a folly, and I don't want to be part of it. So I'm going to vote against it.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Folly.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you. I've taken great account of what Rover said. There is a move now. We're on a journey, aren't we, as far as this kind of industrial landscape across the whole country. And you don't even have to read between the lines. Obviously, this is going to happen more and more and more. And I think if we don't take a constructive stand now and say, yeah, we've got to have them. It makes sense in some places, but we should be very strong about where we think as a council they should be put. They should be put in places where they do the least harm, the very least harm, not significant harm, but the very least harm. And this doesn't do that, does it? However you look at it. And I definitely won't be here in 40 years. I'd be lucky to be here for the next 10, quite frankly. But the whole thing really, really worries me. There is a move afoot for the new government, and that's fine. And we do need to find other ways of delivering all sorts of things. But are we going to ruin our landscape and our district because we're like nodding dogs? I hope not. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, from my point of view, I mean, it is on part of my patch, and I'm really, really surprised that High Bickerton Parish Council hasn't sent in any comments at all. Rather surprised at that. When I read through the report, I think we've got to bear in mind that Natural England had no objections. There was no significant adverse effect on any protected nature. The Devon County Council Historic Environment team withdrew their objection after further works were carried out. The Environmental Protection Officer, no objections following the introduction of a 4-metre barrier. And the bird reports I picked up, the breeding bird field survey showed 20 breeding species were confirmed within the site based on the level of density, but the site was considered to be of less than local importance. And I mean, I think one of the public speakers mentioned the other solar farms around the area. If you drive across Beeford Moor from Torrington towards Winkley, you would not know there was a solar farm up on the left. You can't see it. You can see it slightly from a position in Roborough. But I know farmers have said to solar farms that they have more visiting nesting birds since they've had the panels up. So at the moment I am torn between, but I do see benefits, and I know that some people are worried about the lack or the loss of farmland.
Sure.
So I'll wait for further comments. Yes, Councillor Lennon.
Well, there's been no, I mean, dormice, there's been no report, there's been no investigation about it. They just assume there are none there. I can't believe that when you look at the site, that there are no dormice around. So, but nothing, it's kind of being rushed through and ignoring a lot of things, just to grant it because it's a solar power, and we all support that. But, you know, I'd take it more seriously with the government of the day, whatever government of the day, if they insisted on new dwellings, everybody had to have solar panels, but they don't. So they want to stick acres of them, I mean 73 acres of them on this site, a visible site. And in the planning balance and conclusion, it's stated that the best and most versatile land, that it's time limited for 40 years. And therefore it can't be considered to result in a significant loss of agricultural land. It does for 40 years, there's a loss of it. And we're all supposed to be feeding ourselves in this world now and doing more for agricultural. And all we're doing is building these industrial complexes over our beautiful countryside. And it's not on chair. For what? What benefit? There's no benefit in that. Talk about maybe 8,500 homes may benefit at some time during the year. Certainly won't be in the winter time. You know, we've got to be realistic about it. Find the right locations. Yeah, I'll support them every time for solar. I've got solar at home. So, but this is the wrong place, and it should not be allowed. That's all I'm saying.
Right, so it has been proposed by, and you need to come up with firm planning reasons why we have to refuse this.
I'm
if you
going to
want
ask my
refuse
colleagues
it.
to help me on that one, but
Well, there's a cumulative effect.
cumulative is the main thing.
And loss of.
Can you quote some policies then, please?
Loss of BNV land.
And loss of B&V land. Councillor Leather, can you help me on policy?
I'm going to find some.
Thank you.
Detrimental impact on the.
The planning manager wants to have
All
a
right.
report.
Just to sort of come in on that, we clearly do need, I mean, again, this is a balanced recommendation. Harm is identified, and benefits are identified, and your officer's view, having regard to expert advice in regard to landscape, ecology, and statutory consultees, is that the benefits clearly outweigh the harm. Now, to refuse on cumulative impact, I think the conclusions from the independent expert are that the development would not result in a significant cumulative impact on the landscape character type and would not be a dominant feature. So I think to refuse it on cumulative impact without having a sort of more precise, you know, which other solar farms, I think just to say that would be of concern. Also, no significant effects are predicted in terms of landscape more widely. Note the comments around brownfield sites being preferable, but I think we have to be realistic around how many brownfield sites we have that could, well, we don't have any, I would say that could accommodate something of this scale. And we are a council who've declared a climate emergency, so you need to consider the weight that you're putting to the benefit of providing 8,500 homes with energy. So I think in any
recommendation to go against the officer recommendation, all of those factors need to be very clearly understood and articulated is all I would add there.
I'm very aware of that, being involved very much with the Climate Emergency Committee, as I'm sure you know. But I think on balance that the harm does outweigh the benefits. I don't think the impact on small mammals and things comes in. If you look at motorways, for example, the motorways centre reservation is a haven for small animals. So we normally think if you put a motorway through, you're going to demolish and kill all the small animals. You don't. Maybe this would be a haven for them. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad point. But I think the harm overall does outweigh the benefits, and particularly taking into account what the parish council have said, because they are the boots on the ground on this one. Do we have any other policy numbers that we can put in, because I know that it's numbers we need.
I know that we have the parish council objection. However, I just want to make a point that I've brought a load of solar panel applications committee before, and normally you expect on a site that's controversial quite a few objections, and on this site there are only 5 objections and 1 letter of support. So I understand the parish council are the boots on the ground. However, there isn't actually a lot of objection. You would usually, on a controversial solar panel scheme, I would expect a lot more than 5 objectors.
Right, well, I'm going to, this will be controversial, I think, from the Southern Ireland.
Can I just say,
Sorry?
can I just say the policies that Roper Parish Council quote, do they not stand up?
I would also, let me just get to that a second. What they say.
I mean, they're there, they're mentioned.
Yeah.
Just because a policy is mentioned doesn't necessarily.
No, I understand that.
To appeal. Now, there is a huge risk, and Helen didn't necessarily say this, but there's a huge risk of costs if we are saying this doesn't have a landscape or ecological impact. Okay, we've had it assessed by an independent person. So you've got 2 experts both saying there's no harm. If we then say it's harmful, that's a significant risk of appeal, in my opinion. You can ignore that opinion, and that's fine. Appreciate that, but I have to tell you, I believe there's a significant risk of costs if you go down that reason.
Yes, Councillor.
Just to bear in mind the land classification, this has high levels of tranquility and remoteness, which is where they want to put these industrial powers. Surely it's not just a visual impact. It's a spiritual one. So you feel it. You know they're there. You don't have to see them. Does that not? I mean, I know it's a visual. It's termed a visual impact assessment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think refusing.
But in reality, it's not just visual. You know it's there.
I think who would be experiencing that, I think, is the question as well. I think
Anybody walking the lanes.
Chris talked through the visibility of the site and also proximity to public rights of way. So I think it is some distance from public rights of way. And you know, it's fair to say there is harm. I don't think the officer is saying there's no harm that would arise from this.
But the roads are right of way, aren't they?
But what he is saying is he's attributing weight to that harm, and that's sort of verified or informed by an independent landscape expert who does not consider the harm to be significant. And you do need to weigh that against the benefits of tackling climate change. And as the case, well, as Chris indicated, there is a risk of refusing something on grounds that challenge maybe a technical expert view. So it's just important that it's properly articulated.
But surely it's against Torres District Council's own assessment of landscape sensitivity to field scale photovoltaic development, isn't it?
I would say on that, Councillor Heckle, that the policy does reference that, and as Chris said, that is
it is some years old now, that document, and it would be intended to update that in due course. However, and this has been sort of verified through a legal challenge, and the policy allows for other considerations, other technical evidence. So you have before you a landscape visual impact assessment that has also been independently verified. So that is sufficient evidence for you to base your decision on, notwithstanding that the sensitivity assessment doesn't specifically reference sites of this scale. So again, I don't think you could solely rely on the fact that it doesn't address sites of this scale, because actually you have a technical submission that is supporting this application.
So am I being encouraged to withdraw my proposal on the grounds that we may incur costs at appeal, regardless of how we feel about this? I mean, it's kind of a financial disincentive.
I think as officers, we have to highlight risk,
Of course,
and
of course.
you know, it's highly likely this would be appealed.
Yeah.
I think harm is identified. It's important that that level of harm is acknowledged.
Yeah.
The benefit is acknowledged. Where there's a balanced recommendation, it is of course open to members to form a different balance. However, I think, you know, the important thing to note is there is expert evidence and opinion before you that has influenced the officer's recommendations. I don't know if Chris wants to add anything.
Which is one side of the argument, whereas we're here to try and make a balanced judgment rather than being led by. I agree that the officers know what they're talking about. I'm not suggesting they don't.
And that's fair enough. I think all I would encourage you to do is look at what the policies are saying, and then look at what the balance actually is. Okay, so the local and national policies are saying it's okay on a greenfield site, so you couldn't refuse it on the basis of
Sorry, Chair, with no policy that says it's okay at all.
local and national policy does say that, and that's set out
I've
in.
been looking in here, there's no mention of solar industrial complex at all anywhere in our planning documents. But the thing is, we think it's detrimental to the environment on this particular site. That is the reason I think that we're looking to refuse it, because we think it's detrimental. We've heard what so-called experts have said in various fields. I mean, the one of them had about 4 tons coming up with it making it acceptable. We don't think it is. We've seen that been presented, and the feeling is it's not acceptable, Chair, on this site. We don't want it on that site. Now, they may go away and appeal it, and they may get it, but it's reasonable. It's a reasonable decision we've come to. It's not, we've considered everything, and we think it's detrimental to that location. Now, that's our view from what we've read and what we've had. We've not ignored anything. We've taken everything on board. So if it went to appeal, the planning inspector then would make the decision. But certainly I doubt there'd be any costs awarded against this council, because we've made a reasonable decision, having heard all the evidence. And they never award costs if it's a reasonable reason, and it is, because we think it's detrimental to the environment.
Can you just
The landscape.
Could you just expand a little bit more on the environment? So we have
The
to,
landscape.
in particular, the landscape. Is that what we're saying?
And that good farmland shouldn't be used for this purpose.
Well, can I mean, this is a very difficult one for me, because it does form part of my ward. I've listened to all the objections, and I've also read all the expert advice that we have received. And I do disagree with some of the comments made about the land. I mean, you know, I've studied all the land qualities, and I do agree with what the experts say in there. So I am going to recommend approval.
Chair, can I just come in on?
No, I'm looking for a second before now. Yes, Councillor.
I'll second it. Can I just say something?
Yeah.
About Councillor Leather's points. There's policy SP 16 quoted here, delivering renewable energy and heat. Will be supported in the landscape character types where landscape sensitivity is best able to accommodate and assessed in accordance with the council's landscape sensitivity assessments. So that is in the local plan.
So do I have a second for my proposal? No, right. Councillor Holmes?
You seconded it.
Oh, you seconded it, did you, right?
Reluctantly.
Any more comments then before we go to the votes? And all those that are going to recommend a refusal, are you clear with your reasons? And could you quote them before we go to the vote, please, so that the planning manager can confirm?
What we voting on first, on refusal.
Refusal. Fundamentally, the harm outweighs the benefits in our opinion.
And ST, was it 006? Reference to the
16 is the
16, reference to the assessment of landscape sensitivity.
Conserving and enhancing the natural environment.
You would probably want to add the MOAA if you were refusing on that basis, because that talks about landscape impact. So that would be the kind of key policy, as well as the ST16. You'd also want the MOAA.
Yeah.
Because that's the specific.
I think whichever policy relates specifically to Torres District Council's assessment of the landscape sensitivity to, yeah.
I think I would just add, as I said earlier, we have had subsequent legal decisions that confirm current and up-to-date LVIA, for example, is equally applicable to ST16 in an assessment. So I think the fact the landscape sensitivity assessment as part of that legal decision was recognised as being some years old, and that the scale of these operations have now moved on. So I would just urge that there needs to be regard to the findings of the LVIA and the independent assessment as well.
There might be some, sorry, they might be some years old, but they're still valid as far as we're concerned, because they haven't been superseded. Is that correct?
That's kind of correct. They are old, and the way that solar panels and solar panel schemes they've moved on. Now, what you have to consider how these landscape things were derived at. So it's effectively a large scale desk-based study. No one's gone and stood on that site on this is the specific landscape. It's done on a much wider basis. So actually, when you then have an LVIA, it's a much more nailed down evidence base for you to work with, because it's looking at actually what is this site? What does it make up? What are the important qualities? And then how does this development impact on that? So it almost is the next level in terms of detail. So whilst it is of relevance, it's almost then superseded by the LVIA itself.
And I see Councillor Leather is still browsing through policies. Have you anything that you can help me
I
with?
think parts of policy ST16, delivering
Which is what we said.
renewable energy and heat. I mean, reading through it, it speaks about renewable energy developments can impact on the area's high quality natural and historic environment. Now, I wasn't happy about the ecological side in the report, what it mentions about that, because I don't believe that's been properly assessed. Now, there's a condition in there, written one, but I don't believe that's been properly assessed. But it's the impact on that, the area's tranquility in the dark night skies, the glare and glint from these things affects through the daylight. I mean, it's awful in the daytime, some of these. And I just think the harm to the landscape outweighs, well, I don't know what the benefit of it really is. If it's possibly 8,500 homes getting some solar energy, I don't see what the benefit is. There's nothing. You know, if you have a local wind turbine and a village area with other wind turbine, they get some benefit, financial benefit very often. And they can have them if they want in villages, and you can have a community scheme. There's nothing communal about it. There's no community benefit.
I would say that the benefit, it's not just about community benefit. We are a material consideration is a wider consideration of tackling climate change. Doesn't have to just be specific.
It doesn't have to be in that.
A geographical
Doesn't have to be that.
group of homes and a specific community, that is the wider
Yeah.
benefit.
I think what we're saying is they've had their fair share in that particular community. And we should either be spreading it right. We don't need to take this on board here. I mean, it's the rest of the country could be taking some of these things onto.
Well, talking about community benefit, there was a recently approved solar farm at Ashrailey. And there was a big community benefit scheme going on there.
Which is outside of the planning system.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's
of course.
important to know. I would urge again caution around the cumulative impacts, councillor Smith, because our independent expert has said this wouldn't be it wouldn't enable a more dominant feature in the landscape.
So there's the three benefits, there's the renewable energy to homes, there's the net gain that it would provide, which is significant. And then, what was the final one? Pete's got it in his report.
Economic benefits,
Thank you.
construction.
Business rates.
Oh, you've also got soil enhancements,
Yeah.
so over 40 years, you have better, more productive land at the end of this scheme.
Sorry, I couldn't hear them.
There's a condition which requires them to enhance the soil, so you'd have more productive agricultural land by the time. It's
No, because it's had these panels. on it.
Yeah, it says that in the RBS report.
Is it enhanced by that?
Sheep grazing.
I'm not an expert in soils, I'm afraid, councillor Lever. All I can tell you is that's what was required of the scheme. So they're your three benefits. And we've talked a lot about ST16 and it providing support, but also the very sort of start of the principal development section. Mr. Stapley sets out the relevant paragraphs in the National Planning Policy Framework, which should effectively set out that they shouldn't have to the applicants shouldn't have to justify the need.
We're not asking them to do that, Chris. We're not asking anybody to justify. We're saying that this is the wrong site for this. 73 acres of good farmland being covered with solar panels. Find another site. You know, that's what we're saying, a better site. You know, one that's poorer landscape, poorer soil, that's what we would say, you know, we're not making anybody prove the need for soil, we accept that.
But if you look at the farm
I mean,
land,
the argument we've heard now is tending to say, well, we've got to have these everywhere and anywhere, is what is the fear. And as I said, on this map here, with what we've got in Torridge of solar installations already, any 5 fields and any 6 fields, they'll put them on there. But it's the same argument that we don't like this site, and they are very visible, and they shouldn't be, they should be down lower. We don't like this site because they impact on the environment. And I don't accept some of these, the biodiversity reports about gains, I really don't accept.
And for the record, I do support solar energy. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it sounds as if I'm not supporting. I very much support solar energy. I have to, but not on this site. I agree entirely with Councillor Leather on it.
right, so I think we've given this a very long, thorough debate. Are you satisfied? No.
Well, I think the relevant policies have been cited and members are clearly indicating they come to a different balance in terms of harm and benefit.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So I'll take the first proposal first, and it has been proposed by councillor Smith, seconded by councillor Leather, that the application is refused.
Thank you, Chair. This is for refusal.
Yeah.
Councillor Haynes,
Again.
Councillor Heppel,
Or
Councillor Leather,
Or,
Councillor Locke,
Against?
Councillor Bushby,
Or,
Councillor Smith,
or
Councillor Thomas,
Or.
Councillor Wheatley,
or
Councillor Whitaker. That's 7 for and 2 against. That's for
Do I go
refusal,
to the
Chair.
second one now? No. So that application is refused. Thank you very much. Right. That is the end of the plan and application.
Thank you very much for seeing sense, folks. Thank you. Chair, can I just, pay a visit first?
Right, agenda item number 8, planning decision, planning appeal decision, rather, pages 109, 113. Any comments?
Chair, I think councillor Bushby asked if it could be just wait for until it's. Won't be long.
I always look, I always look.
Thank you.
Number 8, the appeal decision, pages 109, 113. Any comments? 9, cost of appeals, there are none. Number 10, delegated AGMB applications, page 114. Planning decision, pages 115, 116, 117, 118, and 119. There are no part 2 items, so I close